Hello, hello, hello. I've got to, okay, good. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It is a Euro-friendly stream tonight. It is the evening here in Taiwan. And, because I decided to help out every once in a while I like to have a stream that the Europeans can watch. Or anyone else that's not on a good, time zone. So I wanted to start things off talking about Stannis, and I know that Stannis is he's very emotional. He brings out a lot of emotions in people. People love him. People love him. There's so many big Stannis fans, and it's funny because it's not like I don't also like Stannis. He's very entertaining, and he's quite a character, and he kind of has that tough gym teacher exterior where he's like a hard ass, but for some reason you appreciate it, and you're not supposed to like him. George wants you to hate him, but we all kind of like him. It's the same with like Theon. He doesn't want us to like Theon, but we do. Um, and so the big question though is in everyone kind of believes that Stannis is this great general. And the thing is all that's what all the people kind of say about him. They also say that Stannis is a hard ass and isn't flexible. And in the story we see Stannis doing the exact opposite. He's super flexible, constantly changing. There's nothing rigid about Stannis at all, and yet people keep saying he's rigid. Oh, he's iron. He's brittle iron and breaks and doesn't bend and ridiculous. This is a guy who is constantly like changing his plans and dealing with new situations. Really, Stannis kind of, even though everybody claims that he's so rigid, he kind of stands for nothing except for himself. Like, So, but the question is Stannis actually a great general that everyone claims he is? And so from his own mouth, Stannis says that his greatest victories are, he says, I defeated your uncle Victarion and his Iron Fleet off Fair Isle the first time your father crowned himself. I held Storm's End against the power of the Reach for a year. I took Dragonstone from the Targaryens. I smashed Mance Rayder at the wall, though he had 20 times my number. Okay, that's out of his own mouth. That's what Stannis believes his greatest achievements in life are. And then we kind of know that after that we have we can judge his potential fight against Renly before Storm's End and the Blackwater. So let's go through that real quickly. So defeating Victarion and the Iron Fleet off of Fair Isle. So essentially the main situation with this was let's see. Let me pull up a map really quick because it's kind of useful. This map is too big. This map is too big. All right, that's ridiculous. What was that? What was that? Let me pull up a smaller map. Ridiculous. So here's Fair Isle, and Victarion's fleet was coming down, and they went in the straits, and Stannis was hiding here on both sides, and he came and he caught him, and he smashed him because he just he caught him on both sides. Not a bad move from Stannis, more of a boneheaded move from Victarion. Okay, we'll you can give Stannis credit for this, but I would say it's a pretty dumb boneheaded move from Victarion to go through the straits. There was just he should have seen that coming. And then after that, we're dealing with holding off Storm's End for a year, and that has to involved some sort of like rationing and logistics, but he really only succeeded there because Davos happened to get through. You know, I don't want to take, we're not sure when that exactly happened, but like, you know, I don't want to take away, you know, some of Stannis's like logistical know-how in going a number of months. But keep in mind that he really succeeded because Davos happened to go through. So, you know, again, not bad. You know, but I'm failing to see genius yet, right? So after that, we have taking Dragonstone from the Targaryens. That's a weird one, as from Dany's mouth, from Viserys, the fleet was destroyed. So, and that the garrison was ready to give up and surrender. That's a little weird because it doesn't seem like it'd be any battle at all. But nonetheless, like say the Page of Lies is a lie, like I believe. So Stannis took that, but you'd have to say that the Dragonstone fleet would at least be much smaller than Robert's fleet, even if it existed, even if it wasn't destroyed by a storm and it actually existed. We're still looking at probably a smaller force. So either Stannis is, if we take Viserys and Daenerys's beliefs as true, there's nothing to taking Dragonstone. That was just, why is he bragging about that? But then if we take that they were wrong and there's actually a fleet, it would probably be a small fleet. But again, it's not really that big of an achievement. So chronologically, then we come to Storm's End, which Storm's End against Renly, I would actually say is something that shows that Stannis is kind of an idiot. So Stannis is outnumbered, like, by quite a bit. We're talking, he has about 3,000 men, and he is going to go up against Renly. And he has the defensive position. He does. And he plans to face him at dawn so that the sun is going to be in Renly's eyes and everything. But at the same time, Renly outnumbers him like 10-1. It's like 30,000 people, right? And had it not been for the Shadow Baby, which Stannis claims he knows nothing about. Stannis claims he knows nothing about this on a conscious level. He might know about it on a subconscious level. But Stannis straight up was ready to face Renly with like 10-1 odds and get slaughtered. Like, which is kind of a weird thing, right? So I would say Stannis is kind of an idiot there, and he just got super lucky. He got super, super lucky. And that's the other thing is we can kind of go backwards on all of these things. Like, if he faced Dragonstone, if there was a storm that destroyed the fleet, he got lucky there. Maybe he didn't. It's kind of ambiguous. He definitely got lucky with Davos bringing in onions. And then he got lucky with Victarion being dumb enough to go into the Straits. So Stannis is a very lucky dude most of the time. Now, I'm not saying that like these are horrible things, but you know, I don't see anything genius yet, you know. So then next let's talk about the Blackwater. Blackwater, big loss for Stannis. So the thing about the Blackwater is Stannis is down here in Storm's End, and he wants to rush up to King's Landing, and take it fast, and he kind of wants to do that before Tywin can move his forces to King's Landing and reinforce like the Gold Cloak garrison there. What he doesn't realize is that Tywin has made an alliance with the Tyrells, and the Tyrells have brought him barges. and they float down the Blackwater. They get off, and then they take Stannis in the rear. Meanwhile, Imry Florent got bad weather. It was a little unlucky for Imry Florent, and so he feels that he needs to rush in without scouts, and they don't see the towers and chain on the Blackwater, and so and a lot of time is spent on Imry Florent's failure. But Imry Florent had to make up for the fact that there was bad weather. So we kind of give Imry Florent a break. But the thing is, Stannis has scouts. And Stannis' scouts could have seen those towers and chains when they came to the mouth of the Blackwater. Because they're on the southern side, just sitting there building rafts and they didn't do anything about the towers and the chains. And then they didn't send scouts upriver or around them to see if anybody was going to come down the river and take them in the rear. So I would actually say that like Stannis was just on the real basic sense of like, oh my God, you didn't send scouts? You didn't have scouts to check if anyone was coming down river? You didn't to take you in the rear? Like you didn't send scouts to see if they're doing anything sneaky at King's Landing, because they were with the towers and the chain. And they brought the ships up the river and everything. Like Stannis didn't use scouts at the Blackwater. Like Imry Florent, we're specifically told why he didn't use scouts, and he has a good reason. But like, what was the reason that Stannis didn't use scouts? And so I kind of think that like Stannis was outrageously bad at the Blackwater. That's a real boneheaded move. And so then we get to the wall, and the wall is kind of just a lucky thing. He comes up there and he smashes. I mean, granted, there's 100,000 wildlings, but not many of them are actually not that many of them are fighters and everything. But the scouts would have been killed by the wildlings. That's ridiculous. Like in the Kingswood, like, oh, come on. Like riding through, not every single person was riding through, like getting killed by them. That's no. You could send a large enough riding force. The thing is he has a marching army, so he can put enough people on horseback and get him ahead. And so, and this is a big thing, because when we talk about like Kant uses like big theory on the genius of Stannis and how everything in the North with regards to like winning at Winterfell, and I do believe he's going to win at Winterfell, maybe before losing, but like, it all relies on this belief that Stannis is a genius. And we're told everybody thinks Stannis is a genius, but when we actually like look at everything in his history, they vary from, the performance varies from pretty good and to lucky to outrageously bad. Like Stannis was willing to just die and get killed at Storm's End if it weren't for Renly. I mean, if it weren't for the Shadow Babies killing Renly. And he didn't send scouts and was like allowing him to completely lose the Blackwater, like badly. They're big screw ups. I think he was just like overly confident or something, so in the end, like, and granted, George R. Martin has to write an interesting story and has to have people like do things in surprise and stuff like that. So like, don't get me wrong, I understand all of this. But realistically, like, what has Stannis done that shows him to be a genius? And there's actually not much. So like, I love Kant uses like theory and everything on how Stannis is planning this big masterful like win in the north, and I hope that happens. But at the same time, it relies on the premise that Stannis is a genius, and in the past, Stannis has not acted as a genius. Stannis has acted kind of as an idiot. So before, let's see. Now I'm gonna move on to some super chats that my program doesn't really go into the super chats that happen before the stream starts, but I can check on YouTube here. So I have a super chat that is regarding Quentin is alive. Why pick a living person to sub in as a burnt body? We hear he can't say words to Missandei, putting their entire planet at risk. So look, Quentin is alive is not a perfect situation. Like, I'm not saying it like 100% makes sense, but also the reverse, Quentin is dead, makes no sense too. So, you know, we have to take these things into account, right? Like, Quentin is dead. You know, you take into account, like, how did the Windblown leave if they had to go through a labyrinth to get down there? You know, like, how did, like, why would you cut off the action twice? Like, there's all sorts of like little things like that where you're like, well, that doesn't make sense. So yeah, you can go Quentin is alive and find things that don't quite fit. Like, so for Quentin, like, Quentin is alive kind of relies on this idea that there's a body swap that burnt bones prove nothing. We're dealing with body swaps all the time in the story, whether it be Bran, whether it be like Daenerys thinking that happened to Hosea's body, whether it be Mance and Rattleshirt, burnt bones prove nothing. So the idea is that you're going to swap out somebody else, and you know the most like fitting choice is that it was really the Tattered Prince is down. It was down there, and it's the Tattered Prince. And so when they say the prince lay 3 days dying, like, that was the Tattered Prince laying 3 days dying, you know, and he was unrecognizable. Now the Tattered Prince whispers to Missandei, and Missandei, like, would probably figure out over the course of 3 days, like, who this person is. Like, do they have a Pentoshi accent? Do they have a Westerosi accent? Do they have a Dornish accent? Like, but Missandei, you then have to be like, well, Missandei is not necessarily loyal to Barristan. We don't know her loyalties, but the Dornishmen don't know Missandei is a mysterious character. They would assume Missandei is, you know, or whoever would be taking care of the dead body or whatever. Maybe they just thought the dead body would die immediately, you know, or something. So yeah, like, in the body swap situation, Arch and Drink are taking a big risk. Like, they really should have, like, killed the body before people arrived, you know, or something, you know. It's odd to keep the body alive because there's a risk that the body would incriminate them. Or, you know, that wasn't their plan. They just got lucky. Like, they're just sitting there, like, having a conversation with the person, and by accident, the dead body is mistaken for Quentin. And they didn't know, you know. So yeah, it's totally a risky situation. They wouldn't have known all of this information. It is, you know. But keep in mind the reverse also, like, doesn't make any sense. Quentin being dead doesn't make any sense. Does Quentin being alive make 100% sense? No. But Quentin being dead also doesn't make any sense. So that's the situation. Another chat from E. Marty says, Stannis winning is subversion, but Cantius figured it out. So now it's subversion if he loses. Errors in pre-release chapters, including the Asha fragment. I think that I think that the Theon sample chapter gives foreshadowing that Stannis is going to eventually lose to Ramsay and die in that he acts very arrogant and says like, what battles has Ramsay ever won? If if it weren't for the Theon sample chapter, I mean, the Theon sample chapter adds a bit more with regards to like the ravens and things like this, and um, but the but I think it actually adds more to my belief that Stannis is going to eventually lose and die than it does the reverse. We're in the Winds of Winter, we're set up to believe that like Stannis is in a very bad situation, and and as literature goes, like if you set something up one way, you got to flip it. So he's set up to lose, and so now we flip it and he wins, right? And now you're saying that like the fandom has been talking about it now for like for for 12 years, and therefore like it seems like Stannis winning is the thing that is known and the subversion is the reverse. But on the sort of like meta analysis level, but remember that like Winds of Winter sets it up like Stannis is gonna lose, and there's weird suspicious things about like the holes in the lake and stuff like that, even though like I had an actual like ice fisherman, like a person that goes ice fishing in Minnesota, like contact me, and they're like, dude, those ice holes freeze fast. Like I don't know what, unless they're ice fishing like like 2 hours before, an hour before the battle, all the previous like holes wouldn't matter. And I'm like, that's a good point. It's a good point. But does George know that? Like why is all of this time spent on the holes if they're not going to play a role? But then somebody actually saying like the holes don't matter, man. Like it's cold. It would just refreeze like really quick. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. That's true. That's true. So, I mean, I still do think that like George planned on those holes being a thing, but he is absolutely right that like like ice fishing holes like refreeze really fast. In fact, he was saying that like there's all the time you're in the middle of fishing and your ice hole refreezes and you have to recut in the middle of your your time there. But from Arva Kuka, does Martin imply the dragons have human souls? Drogon equals Drogo, flies back to the Dothraki Sea. Rhaegal equals Rhaego. Viserion equals Miri. If tamed, interesting if tamed by the Dornish. I do think that like George makes these sorts of weird, creepy analysis, like references, but I don't know if he, how seriously he takes it. Right? Like obviously anytime you rename somebody in life, like let's say you name your kid after your grandpa, in a sense, like you're naming the spirit of him is in the name. You're honoring this person, and so in this George R. Martin sense, like remember old Nan, remember her stories, and then she's never dead. Like in that sense, the person doesn't die because the spirit of them, But then we're like conflating like metaphorical spirits with like literal spirits, even though literal spirits don't even exist, and I don't think George R. Martin believes in literal spirits. He believes in metaphorical spirits. But like so I think there's this idea that like Viserion would perhaps take on personality of Viserys or what, but I think this is also done with like the like swords and armor and crowns and all sorts of things like that, like the idea that human souls are passing. But but do I think like literally does George think that Drogo's soul is in Drogon? No, I don't. I think he might sometimes like hint at these things and like but I just think there's too much already with Daenerys' soul mingling with Drogon and then being like having consciousness blending is probably already there rather than having Drogo in there. Anyway, so as so spake Martin, George had flat out admitted that Jan's Ron Royce's friendship with Ned was a motivating factor in him wanting to join Robb right from the horse's mouth. Remember this in the fanfic. Sure. I have to read that so spake Martin, but I believe Joel, you're talking about like the entire Vale, and again, like Jan Royce, like we kind of know he has a friendship with Ned, and that they like chat when Waymar goes north and things like that. But but we'd end. I'm trying to think otherwise. But we don't know anything else. I mean, keep in mind that like Ned is in the Vale as a teenager. Like how old is Bronzion Royce? Do we even know? We don't. We know that he's got granddaughters though already, so he's a bit older. Anyway, I'd have to read what exactly was said with the so spake Martin, but but again, like I don't I know we've talked about this before, but I think reading into some sort of like honor bound connection between the Valemen and the Northerners, based on a friendship, based on like Ned's warding time in the Vale, is a bit much. Like I don't see anything necessarily honorable about Robb's cause. I don't see anything honorable about Valemen. I understand that like people want to have like various outs to have like the story come together in a cohesive fashion, especially when dealing with like you see it with like the theory about the Grand Northern conspiracy, that like everyone wanted to put Jon on the throne, really, the Brotherhood Without Banners for Jon, Lady Stoneheart for Jon, like Riverlanders all for Jon. You're like, really? Tom of Sevens like found out that the will named Jon from Edmure, and then he's gonna pass that information on to Cat, and you're no, it's all like that's all too neat. It's all too neat for they would have done something earlier. But I think we just don't see that with the Valemen. The Valemen we see as being a bunch of schemers, like just like everybody else. They I mean, half of them like get bribed by Littlefinger. Okay, so let's see here. Okay. Summerhall equals egg, accidentally summoning R'hllor, then can't mind his tongue. I could be a red god if I wanted to. The thing about the universe in general is it's interesting that a lot of fans like really talk about various gods being real. Like they talk about R'hllor being like a lot of fans really believe that like R'hllor is an actual like real deity, and like perhaps the Great Other as an actual deity. But that's not in any way like what we've seen so far. What we've seen so far is that like none of the gods are real. Like, we don't. Bran makes it to the north, and he meets the old gods, and he pulls the curtain back, and it's an old man in a tree, like, and some like elf-like creatures. Like, there are no old gods. They're not gods. They're like they're 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 a weird depository of souls, right? George has never, except for some very early stories, he's never written a story that has real gods in it, like actual deities. And it just doesn't seem like him. I mean, he's an atheist, and there's so many points in the story where people are full of crap and lying, and it's a moral tale about people choosing their own morality. Like Jaime choosing his own path, like realizing that like phoning it in and following Aerys is the wrong thing to do. Like the Brienne and Jaime story is about what it means to be moral gets destroyed if there's actually gods. If there's actually gods, then you just follow gods, right? And you don't have to take the existential path of figuring out what's right and wrong for yourself. So I think that thematically, like, one, just George is an atheist, and he's never written about deities being real. But two, like, deities actually being real would destroy like the themes of the book, which is about all the existential themes of the book about like choosing one's own morality and like figuring it out for yourself, and the difficulties and complexities of that. Because the world becomes very simple if there's gods in it. Well, you just follow gods, like, some gods are good, and we're just gonna fight for the good gods. That's all we got to do. So I think it's not that I don't think that like thematically you're on to something. I think that like you have a very purely good character like Egg, where we have 3 stories, and the only things we know about Egg is that he's a good kid. Dunk and Egg are some of the best characters, like, and I mean best in a moral sense, they're good people kind of sense. Are some of the best characters that we have, like Dunk, Egg, Brienne, Davos, like, John, like that's a Sam, right? And so with having Egg do something dark or misguided would be fitting, like there's some sort of fall from grace that like caused this whole thing to happen. So I think it's there might be something there that like he did something, he was mistaken there, but like I don't know, I don't think it's summoning R'hllor. No. Not saying it was the sole motivator, but we know from How Many Lords Backed Renly that some nobles just don't like the Lannisters. We're talking about the Vale again. Sure. Like lots of people don't like the Lannisters, but there's different choices that one can make if you just don't like the Lannisters. Like you vie for independence. You can sit it out and do nothing. Wait to see who's up, who's on top, just not support him. And so, I mean, the Vale has essentially done that. They've just sat back and done nothing while everybody else fought. But again, it's like, why don't they like the Lannisters? Like what reason do the Vale Lords have for not liking the Lannisters? Like, the Reachers had some reasons. They actually liked Rhaegar and liked the Targaryens, and even them, like Mathis Rowan, like he sat down and played ball even though it made him sick. So you sit with the Vale Lords, like, what connection do the Vale Lords have? Like, were the Vale Lords like pissed off that Tywin like killed some kids? Because we don't have any quotes of them doing that, like being upset. Were they upset that like they killed Brandon and Rickard? Like, well, we don't have any quotes or anything on that. Like, why? Why would they care? You know, um, like what you know. They eventually the Lannisters killed Ned, but maybe they liked Ned, but Ned did like do a coup. It's one guy. Does everybody like Ned? Why does everybody like Ned? It's like I understand we all love Sean Bean, but like, why should everybody like Ned? yeah. um, let's see here. Let's get down here. Fuck. Okay. Am I even at the beginning? Um, Hail the Manus. With the recent passing of Jimmy Buffett, R.I.P., do you have any thoughts on his legacy of island escapism or his multi-million dollar Margaritaville brand? This is very funny question. That you have. I mean, I'm very happy you asked this question because, like, I have more to say about Jimmy Buffett than probably like any person would. like, so for some reason, I grew up in the Mid Atlantic of the United States, and the Mid Atlantic in the '90s is a weird place. And even when I talk to other Americans, like about how things were for me in high school growing up there, they don't really get it. And what I mean is like there is this weird. So in the Mid Atlantic, we love lacrosse. Lacrosse is the big sport. If you're from like the South in America, high school football is really huge, but like high school lacrosse is like a big deal. A big deal. Very kind of like weird. I would say preppy because when you say like preppy, you think of like those movies the with the kids with the the button up shirts that are like, oh, I'm going to Harvard, and like no 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 no, like Mid Atlantic, it's like they have like mullets and they wear like a baseball cap, and they've got that has like maybe Hopkins lacrosse on it, and like so it's this weird embodiment of the hippie jock. Like I know you say hippie, like hippie is like weed smoking dudes like in California going, oh man, yeah, they're all smoking weed and they're listening to the Grateful Dead and Fish, but they're playing lacrosse and they're the jocks. And like when I explain like the hippie jock, if you're not from like the Mid Atlantic or maybe the Northeast of the United States, like maybe I don't even know if it's that way anymore in the '90s, you don't get it. So all these kids were super into Jimmy Buffett too. Like that was like part of their music list. Steve Miller, Jimmy Buffett, Fish, Grateful Dead. You don't think it all goes together, but lacrosse, like they had T-shirts when I was young. It was like Grateful Dead bears walking up mountains with like lacrosse sticks in their hands. It all sounds. I'm sure to like Europeans this is very perplexing, but this is like an odd cultural thing from like Mid Atlantic, maybe Northeast United States. Um, so Jimmy Buffett, and the thing is like he's he's just I don't, it's not his fault that he had these like weird asshole hippie jocks like listening to his music. Because his music was all about like, yes, this island escapism, of like living in the sunshine and like just drinking and hanging out all day. But when you actually go to like islands, and I've been to a lot of islands around the world, I've spent a lot of time diving and bumming out on islands, whether it be Thailand or Honduras or whatever, Indonesia, like you name it. the Red Sea in Egypt. Like there's a lot of these like hippie places where like surfers live and all sorts of stuff. When you actually like hang out in these places, these island paradises in the Caribbean or wherever, they're not really listening to Jimmy Buffett. they're listening to Bob Marley, certainly. They're listening to reggae, but it's not like you're here in Margaritaville. So like it's odd that like it's it's for this like American non-island consumption. And Jimmy Buffett lived that lifestyle. He was on those islands. Don't get me wrong, like living that lifestyle. But the people there, it wasn't of that culture. It was of him like exporting it back, like reporting on what he'd seen. Anyway, I did go to a Margaritaville once. I went to the Bahamas, and I went to the Margaritaville there. It was very good. It was very good restaurant. I liked it fine, but it's such a weird thing because what it tries to culturally be doesn't really exist, and who he's like feeding the product to, like doesn't is a different crew. It's much like Panda Express or something, or Taco Bell, right? You go. It's not like in Mexico. I mean, I'm sure there's Taco Bells in Mexico now, but like a taco in Mexico is not Taco Bell, and Panda Express is not Chinese food. However, marketed in America, you're selling that exoticness. Like islands themselves don't actually have Jimmy Buffett music, but he's like selling that exoticness as a commercial product back to like mid-Atlantic America, to hippie jocks playing lacrosse. So anyway, that was a long fucking explanation of something that I'm sure most Europeans are like, what the fuck are you talking about? Jimmy Buffett, man. Jimmy Buffett. Stannis is no BS and anti-status quo. He's my favorite, and that's the thing, is I think Stannis gets a good rep because he's got great dialogue. He's got great fucking dialogue his whole time. You get some great lines, whether it be like really touching stuff about the Renly's peach, or about Proudwing and like talking to people, or like no nonsense kind of stuff to John and stuff, and at the wall, or like being creepy in a tower with Asha. So I think it's really that he's everything Tyrion should be, right? Like Tyrion is the guy that you're supposed to like because he's got all these witty retorts. But people like Stannis for his witty retorts, but they claim they like him because he's a freaking military genius. When Tyrion, I suppose, has better cred than Stannis when it comes to actually military planning. If Trump were reelected, would he even be able to govern? Would the administrative state ever again trust him with confidential documents? Here's the thing: is this idea of like there is no administrative state, there is no deep state, there's no administrative state. Okay, so like when people are told to do their job, they do their job. Okay, and they don't have a choice. So like you do what you're told to do. Like there's plenty of things that Trump did when I was working that like you have to do, like related to what he does. Like it's not him directly. Usually he appoints somebody, and then they do some things. But like you don't have a choice. So like this idea that there would be like a conspiratorial, rebellious like coup within the state, like within the government, to resist Trump, like to resist the president when they don't like policies. It's just not how things go. It's just not how things go. I mean, keep in mind that like the heads of all the agencies are political appointees anyway. So like, and then usually a layer down too. So like the deep state is this myth. It's we're like the grunts, you know? It's the equivalent of saying like, oh, like would the regular common soldier like ever trust his general? Well, or like his commanders. Well, what choice do they have? Like they're the grunts. So would they trust him with confidential documents? Well, first of all, like so in government, there's also different levels. So confidential is actual classification level. I know you're using confidential to mean like everything, but like there's different levels. So we top secret, secret, confidential. So like, just saying that when you use a word like confidential, it ends up being confused. But like sensitive, you could say, with sensitive documents would probably be the word you're looking for. But they wouldn't have a choice. They just wouldn't have a choice. I mean, if Trump were reelected, it would be a disaster. It'd be a fucking disaster. It was a disaster the first time. Like, we're still reeling from it. We don't know if American democracy is going to survive the election if Trump wants. Probably wouldn't make it a second time. I mean, are we going to get to the 301 in the fanfic? Yeah, eventually. I mean, we're about what, like, halfway through 300, maybe 3/4 way through 300. I think we're going to get to the year 301. Probably eventually 302 if we make it to a Dream of Spring and make it through everything. We just take it day by day. Sometimes I get really depressed and like I get a lot of anxiety about like the fanfic and like whether or not like I continue on with it because it's just a lot of work and stuff like that. And you're just like, man, I just wish George would finish his book. So but it's yeah, definitely 301. The question is 302, probably 302. Maybe the end would be 302. But I think that's it. But yeah, I think so. I like Stannis because I don't think he has an underlying secret motive like a lot of characters. He's just doing what he believes needs to be done. I agree with you in that it's not that secret. I think his secret motive is selfishness. I think his secret motive is I care about myself. I'm going to claim that it's for justice or because I'm the real heir and this is the duty or for succession and the realm and all sorts of things he's going to claim, but it's really just for himself, I think. But you're right that like he doesn't have there's not as much scheming with regards to like Littlefinger Varys kind of stuff where you're like, what the fuck are their loyalties? What are they doing? We have no clue. And it's, we've been wondering about like what their plan and their motivations are for so long. And like Stannis is just like, he wants to rule, and somebody told him he believes in himself, and somebody told him that he's a god. Sure, that works for me, But it's but he does seem straightforward. You understand him, you understand his story and his plot pretty well, versus like the Golden Company and Varys and Illyria. You're still like, what the fuck are they doing? Like, what? Like, we know exactly why Stannis left Dragonstone. We know why he faced his brother and why his brother died. We know why he went to the Blackwater. We know why he went to the Wall. We know why he wants Winterfell. Like he flat out tells us all of these things, like he wants Winterfell for an alliance with the Wildlings. Like that, it's very clear. It's straight out of his mouth. While like Varys and Illyria, it's just like, what are they doing? What are they doing? And there's also not like the same insanity where you're just like, well, they say one thing and something else is going on, like Cersei, where you're just like, what the fuck are you doing? There's no logic to anything you're doing, or Tyrion, where it's just this like, he's motivated by these weird abstract like family hatreds and and stuff like that. So of course, for the same reason, you could say that you should like Dany's pretty simple. Like we know, Dany's pretty straightforward in her motivations. So there's not much being hidden there, considering we're in her head. Preston, yet again, a plot hole. Game of Thrones, chapter 30. Gregor storms off King's Landing after the Hand's Tourney. And after about 2 weeks, chapter 43, Ned sits the throne, hearing about raiding the 3 cities in the Riverlands by Gregor. Let me try to get this timeline down. Because I think it's even worse than this, because I think Ben Ned at this point thinks that Gregor has gone back to his castle, and that they're going to find him there, and that they're going to bring justice to him there. So it's like he leaves King's Landing, would somehow like be causing trouble in the Riverlands, and then go home. Now let's see. Is it about 2 weeks? Let's try to figure out this situation. 2 weeks, because keep in mind that like Game of Thrones has a much longer timeline than the others, where a lot of time goes by in between stuff. So let's figure this out. The Hand's Tourney is let's see. Hand's Tourney. All right, so the Hand's Tourney, according to the fan-made A Song of Ice and Fire timeline, they're saying that the Hand's Tourney happens sometime in September of 298. And then later on, oh god, yeah, just 2 or 3 weeks later, they send the Brotherhood Without Banners against Gregor in October. Let's see if they can. Let me see if we could extend this out. Hold on a second. Yeah. Okay. Oh. So essentially, we do know that these. So Ben is correct that we kind of know that these events happen pretty close together, because after the Hand's Tourney, they oh jeez. Okay, so we know that during the Hand's Tourney, Arya is assigned by Syrio Forel to start catching cats. And then she is in the process of catching cats when she hears about Cat kidnapping Tyrion. So Cat kidnapping Tyrion like breaks as news. So you can kind of say like how many days has passed since Arya has been catching cats. Has she been catching cats like 2 days, 3 days? Probably not too many days, right? So we know that that the news breaks of Tyrion getting captured within a few days, at most a week after the Hand's Tourney. And then once the news breaks, Jaime attacks Ned, and then Ned is asleep for 7 days, and then he wakes up and Robert is hunting, and so he deals with the Brotherhood Without Banners. So yeah, you're talking like, yeah, it can't be more than 2 or 3 weeks. Now, the distance, we can go back to our map here. So say he's he's here. Then he's on his way home from the tourney, and he decides to like attack and kill people on his way home. Um, the thing is, it's such a weird. Like, why would he take that route home? I mean, I could somewhat see, because the thing is like we know that like when they come and complain about Gregor, that it's Dairy Piper and what's the last one? But nonetheless, like Dairy, we know that Dairy lands are up near Harrenhal. So like there's just why would so the plot hole, like I could maybe buy the timeline that he's riding home, and he's riding home fast with his men, and he somehow like he attacks everybody, and then he's still on his way home, but everybody in King's Landing figures he's on his way home, so they're gonna meet him at Clegane Keep. So I think that's okay. I think the weird thing is that like why would Gregor be on that road? Because he just but I mean somehow he's ordered by Tywin, but why is Tywin up there? I mean, whatever the case is, by the way, bringing this up, I've always thought that like Gregor was innocent of this, that the people were lying, that it'd just be weird. I don't know how it would work out, like honestly, like because you'd have to there'd be no like Tywin would have to know that Tyrion was going to get kidnapped, and he would have had to dispatch Gregor early to get to that point in order to, but anyway, there's a bunch of suspicious things about the attacks anyway, but I don't know. I could do an entire, like I did do a series essentially like centered around this chapter of Gregor's, this is the weirdness of Gregor, like, and the attacks on Mummer's Ford and Wendish Town and stuff, and it just none of it makes sense. But Gregor shouldn't be there. He shouldn't be there. He shouldn't be there on his own, certainly. So I don't know what could have happened, but yeah, lots of plot holes, lots of plot holes in that situation. Because I mean, he could do it. It would be a really tight timeline, but if he's ordered by Tywin, or it would there'd be not enough time. Stannis is great because he had the vision to notice and take advantage of opportunities. Luck, Stannis being prepared, and good improvising. I mean, there's certainly definitely some things that like he takes advantage of, like the luck of taking advantage of the wall getting attacked and realizing that he can get more forces because he can try to get the wildlings. That's certainly a risky, savvy move to get up there and like do what he's doing. It's bold. It's very bold. Some of the luck, it's like, well, Davos going through and getting in there is just pretty much good luck, Renly dying, it's sort of like he's crafty enough to have around him immoral people like Melisandre, who are going to like kill his brother for him, and get him out of those situations. So, in that sense, I see what you're saying. There's definitely aspects to it. I mean, I think that Stannis definitely benefited from some actual good luck and some bad luck. I mean, he had some bad luck too, but I think that the bold, I respect his boldness to go all the way up to the wall, Tywin is the best overall commander in the War of the Five Kings, as he is an adequate battlefield commander, but is able to capitalize on political situations to benefit his faction in war. I'm trying to think. I mean, Tywin's not bad. He there is some situations where he fails. Like he fails at the Green Fork if you to get it to achieve his objectives, because he he underestimates Gregor and Tyrion. Like he thinks both of them are crap, and they're actually much better at what they do than he thinks. His whole thing was he put Gregor and Tyrion on one side, thinking that their side was going to collapse, and then they both overperform. It's a weird point in the story to actually think that like the Mountain and Tyrion were like fighting together side by side, and like, I mean, not side by side, but like very close. They can see each other and like overperform, and like and are, you know, we're set up to get pretty much slaughtered. Um, but don't. But I mean, Tywin coming down, like moving his forces and getting all the way down, and taking Stannis in the rear is, and having that come together is it's good. It's good. It's funny though, because he also gets lucky because he can be a little schizophrenic in like when he trusts his children and when he doesn't trust his children. And when he trusts his children, he gets really lucky that his children overperform. And when he doesn't trust his children, you know, they also overperform. So the big thing about like Tywin, it gets very lucky because his Cersei and Tyrion. One of my favorite things about the Blackwater is the fact that the Lannisters, even though they hate each other, all of them working together overachieve and like succeed in victory, almost in an odd, uncoordinated fashion. So like Cersei is the one that decides that wildfire is a really good idea, and Tyrion is the one who decides that the chain comes up with the chain, and Tywin is the one that figured out to like come and take people from the rear. And had any one of those people like not done their job, and keep in mind, Cersei put more money into the gold cloaks and like pushed up the gold cloaks and everything. Like had Cersei not done a really good job in A Clash of Kings, which is insane considering Cersei is nuts and she can't do anything right in A Feast for Crows. But for some reason in A Clash of Kings, Cersei is a fucking genius. she's really good, like battle tactics wise in A Clash of Kings. And Tyrion does, you know, the Tyrion's chain thing, it works out. It's good stuff. And so, you know, that all works out. Had they not overperformed, like they you know, the king would have been killed, Joffrey would have been killed earlier, and everything, you know, before Tywin's forces arrived. So I really like that the Lannisters like work together without working together. That like, which, you know, maybe is a metaphor for their family. You know, they succeed even though they all hate each other, and that there's this weird like, you know, symbiotic like relationship between them. So I do, you know, and obviously like Tywin's the red wedding is a pretty masterful move, even if one thinks it's rather immoral. It's a pretty masterful move to win a war and destroy one's enemy quite quickly. Now, I'm trying to think of like where Tywin like really screws up. Like, does he have? I mean, I think there's some early Riverland losses that he positions himself poorly. I don't necessarily think that the foraging parties, like the Sir Amory's men, the Mountain's men, and the Brave Companions, are good allies to use. And I don't necessarily see the function, like going and terrorizing the Riverlands. Like, what did that achieve? Like militarily, like how did it help them win the war? They like terrorized and brutalized the Riverlands, and what did they really achieve? I mean, if anything, he trusted the Brave Companions, and he shouldn't have trusted the Brave Companions, and that was, you know, not great. So Tywin screws up, but, you know, I admit that, like, for the most part, especially the Blackwater, he does very, very well. He does very well with his delegation of, but it's just kind of random. Like, this is a guy who wanted to kill his son at the Green Fork, and then he makes him hand. So weird, right? So weird. How can Tuf save Planetos? Also, the Kings won a civil suit against the FBI. Preponderance on assassination is still crazy. Jantony equals John. So yeah, the FBI was following. The FBI was definitely like following Martin Luther King. They definitely saw him as an anti-government element, uh, whether justified or not. Like, I don't think it was justified, but they thought he was some sort, a piece of instability, that they should keep an eye on. Just like, today we have the FBI watches, domestic terrorist groups, and so they were watching Martin Luther King. So it was the Kings probably, were able to win that one. But on Tuf, this is referring to Tuf Voyaging. George R. Martin wrote a series of short stories that were eventually put together into a book called Tuf Voyaging, about a guy named Haviland Tuf who has a giant genetic engineering spacecraft that can go from planet to planet and do dreamlike, godlike things with genetic engineering. So like he can go to a planet and like say the planet doesn't have enough wildlife. He can like introduce wildlife. He can introduce like say that they say they're starving. He can introduce like plants that can produce massive amounts of food. Say there's not enough grasslands. He can produce a grass that can grow on almost no water or something like that. Genius with that. Genius with genetic engineering. So what can Tuf do to save Planetos? It depends what you think is like wrong with Planetos. Like, if you think that like, what causes Planetos's uneven seasons, is a long night actually coming? I know that like starvation is going to happen, so he can probably introduce to them like winter growing plants where they can have harvests in the winter. That would probably be a thing. Various types of nutrition like mushrooms and stuff that can grow underground, animals that can withstand, livestock that can withstand the cold. Like, he could do all of that and save Westeros. If you're talking about like climate change, you would have to like, think about some other things like, create if they're freezing, maybe they need more greenhouse gases. So he just puts down a lot more pigs. But there are a lot of things that like Tuf could do to benefit the situation down there. But he would hate Planetos. He would look at the people and he'd be like, you guys are a bunch of idiots. Like why should I help you? You're a bunch of religious zealots who are all killing each other. Like, what can you possibly, like, what could they offer him? Like, give him all the gold in Casterly Rock, I suppose, but I don't know, Jantony equals John. I think it's more that Jantony equals Rhaegar. Well, Jan Vickery, I would say. I don't want. Yeah. Jan Vickery he's kind of this like super idealistic guy who wants to change and reform his people, but his people like are resistant, and he's not quite politically savvy enough to like take power. He's a little too idealistic and not quite, even though he's very charismatic, he's not quite, doesn't quite have it to affect change. So I think it's more that like, and fails, Jan Vickery fails like in what he does. So Rhaegar is kind of that character too. Now, does Jon have some of that in him? Yeah, he does. But Jon, I would say, is like much less politically savvy than Rhaegar or Jan Vickery. Like Jon fails pretty quick, and gets stabbed pretty quick. So I would not say he has, any of that. But question maybe off topic, but who do you think are the landed gentry of Westeros? Landed gentry was a large historic British social class of landowners who live entirely from rental income, or at least country estates. Without a noble title, owning rural land often brought in legal rights of the lord of the manor. And so I think this is where we're getting like barons and stuff. Like in England today. I mean, I think it's just like, I don't know it like how so there's all these like various disputes about how feudalism actually worked and how armies were actually formed and things like that. And keep in mind, like, George R. Martin is largely working on his rough idea of how things worked and how he sees it in literature and stuff like that. Now, keep in mind that like understanding exactly how feudalism worked probably varied from different places in Europe, and you probably have to be an actual historian to really understand like the ins and outs of like, where, like, when was it a situation where professional military people fought for a lord versus like peasantry, like getting handed like pikes to fight in a war and things like that. And like, what year was that happening? Like, did the system change from 1400 to 1500 and things like this? Like, this kind of stuff, like, it was a very, like, the Middle Ages was 1,000 years, it was 1,000 years. And it was a continent of thousands of different cultures with thousands of kings living over this period of time. And, and so like, when we kind of homogeneously think about, feudalism and knights and lords and stuff like that, we like to simplify it, but it was probably very, very complicated. Probably more complicated than political systems say today, or like how things are run today in Europe. So I don't know if like how much time or like George is like putting into understanding exactly like who these people are and their relationships and how their income is pulled in and stuff like that. We only get hints here and there, like who's in the armies. Like, it does seem like in Westeros, you've got peasants in the armies rather than like professional military, like soldiers and things like that. And we hear about lords pulling in their lands and incomes. So I imagine your serfs are paying some sort of rent on the land and stuff like that. But you don't hear about, but they're also like the generals and stuff like that. But we don't hear about these like regular, like these like British titles of living Jane Austen like lifestyles, or something, like I don't know. It's it's a very complicated thing defining all of these like terms, and I don't certainly understand them all, and I don't think George understands them all. I don't think anyone outside of actual historians like get it. You think George R. Martin knew at book one how the mountain story will unfold? Currently rereading book one, and Santa asks what will happen to his head at table. I think yes, specific with the mountain, I do. Or at least I think he thought there would be an undead monster of some sort. Bran has some visions in book one about clearly the mountain, and let me bring up the exact quote from the thing is, like, George changes his mind all the time. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, when people are like, oh, George has confirmed that this and this is going to happen. I was like, well, this idea at the time, you know. But with the mountain, it's himself. Like, I think he had a fairly clear idea. In Bran's vision, he is, let me see here. I think it's Bran. Here we go. So Bran is flying in Bran 3 during his coma dream. And he says he looked south and he saw a great blue-green rush of the trident. He saw his father pleading with the king, his face etched with grief. He saw Sansa crying herself to sleep at night, and he saw Arya watching in silence and holding her secrets hard in her heart. There were shadows all around them. One shadow was dark as ash, with the terrible face of a hound. Another was armored like the sun, golden and beautiful. Over them loomed a giant in armor, made of stone, and when he opened his visor, there was nothing inside but darkness and thick black blood. Now, when you hear something like that, like him opening the visor and being nothing but darkness and thick black blood inside, it could be that, like, at the time, George was just saying, oh, the mountain is evil, and he was there. You know, he's evil. But of course, like the thick blood thing later, when we're talking about like the like Oberyn stabbing him with the spear, and like him not showing his face and stuff like that coming in later. I mean, it could be that George, like, later on was like, I'm going to take this Bran vision and then change it to what the idea I've come up with here, you know, or he had an idea like here at the beginning of what it was. But so I suppose it could go either way, but I do kind of think that he had this idea that he was going to be turned into some sort of monster at some point, based on that Bran vision. I mean, you could, you know, as I say, you could say that like he'd made the Bran vision and then later like changed the story to try to fit it. But I don't know. I think he did. But we'll see. Where did Orain Waters secure men to manage Drummonds? Oh, I mean, these are you know, general just sell sales, people working in the docks and stuff like that. He just has money. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I think he just hires men and then takes them on. I don't think it's very difficult to find like, you know, find regular Joes around there, but you know, just at the docks, people looking for work, that kind of stuff. You know, I don't think it's necessarily too difficult. Man, I'm so behind. Stannis will lose the battle but fake his death. That's what well, I mean, he certainly faked his death. You know, like there's no way that the pink letter can be, like, I don't know. There's just so many reasons why the pink letter just can't be true. It just doesn't. Just everything about like the timeline, like says that, and the letter itself just makes no sense. But will he fake his death? Yeah. Now, my original idea on like why Stannis faked his death is that well, the thing is, I thought Mance was writing the pink letter. But if Mance and Stannis were working in concert, which they could be working in concert, Stannis and Mance had a conversation before Stannis left. And so, and Mance later starts doing things that seem to be aiding Stannis. So it seems that Stannis and Mance might be working in concert. So whether Mance wrote the pink letter, whether Stannis wrote the pink letter, they're working. Let's say they're working in concert. The Stannis has to. I think that the timelines are off, and that Stannis wants the Wildling army to march south. That he wants to get them riled up to come down to fight for him. Having the Wildlings fight for him has been Stannis' plan from the beginning. Well, from the beginning of when he was on Dragonstone and heard about the wall. But, I mean, from the beginning. I mean, obviously not from the Game of Thrones. But from the beginning of his northern adventures, his plan was to use the Wildlings to fight for him. And so, I do think that, like, the thing about the pink letter is it's totally is there to rile up the Wildlings. So, you know, if John 13, that's the last chapter of Dance with Dragons, happens enough ahead of, like, Stannis' battle, then the letter can actually bring them down to start affecting change. Now, maybe not at the Crofters' village, but eventually, like when he's talking about maybe taking Winterfell or taking some other places, you know. Certainly Mance, if Mance is the author, he certainly wants the Wildlings to come down. If Stannis is the author, he would probably want the Wildlings to come down. Because why else create chaos at the wall? Like, who else does that serve? You know. I mean, I suppose if you're Ramsay, maybe it serves something. But so he kind of has to do it in order to try to get the Wildlings to come down. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I think we've analyzed like the North so much that there's so many things that don't really make sense about it. But I don't think George has not thought about the North as much as the fans have. Just because one human being can't do the work of thousands. Your Dragon X Gene series is an absolute banger. Thank you. But I think you made a mistake about Bloodraven freaking out about Summerhall and going north. Bloodraven went north before Summerhall. Yeah, now keep in mind that like when I did the Dragon X series, the World of Ice and Fire was not out. So that was based purely on Princess and the Queen, Rogue Prince, like and stuff. So there's a lot of things like even with like and there are some small changes in the family tree too. So I mean, keep in mind like it's just the time of when I put it out. I'm trying to think when did I do that. Genetics of Dragons and War was 7 years ago, and the World of Ice and Fire came out. Wait, 2014? Is that? Wait, did it? Am I wrong? Did it? Was it out before the? How am I? Really? Maybe I did base it on stuff in there. I'm sorry. I thought I'm like looking at my own thing. I'm sorry. Maybe I did. I wonder when the exact date. October 7th, 2015. And World of Ice and Fire came out in 2014. I guess it was out. I guess I did base it on that too. Huh. Yeah. Okay. I guess World of Ice and Fire came out a year before my genetics video. Um, but yeah, Bloodraven went north before Summerhall. Yes, yes, Bloodraven went north. Was sent after the essentially after the Great Council, um, of 233. Yeah. So, um, Egg gets Egg gets upset at him for beheading, um, Hagon, but yeah, yeah. So yeah, I mean, I don't remember talking about Bloodraven Free because it was 7 8 years ago, but I don't remember that. But yes, that would be that was a mistake I made. Was made a mistake. Um, is there? Let's see here. Um, Jorah Lannister's tale based on Manon Lescaut. Huh. Let me see this. I don't know. The story is set in France. Manon Lescaut. Lescaut. Manon Actually, I gotta do it all French, right? Mene Lescaut. Is a novel set in France. 17-year-old studying philosophy comes upon a noble family, forfeits his heredity and wealth, and incurs disappointment with his father by running away with Manon on her way to a convent. The young lovers enjoy blissful cohabitation, but he cannot satisfy her taste for luxury. Um, and so his wealth evaporates, and then the two lovers end up in New Orleans, in which he's been deported as a prostitute, and they pretend to be married, and then reveals the unmarried state. He asks, and then she sets high sights on winning Manon's hand. They challenge to a duel, and then they flee New Orleans and venture into the wilderness. Manon dies of exposure. And now there are some similarities here. I will say that the similarity. Let's see. Obviously, the similarities are that Jorah cannot keep up with the tastes of his wife. The other is New Orleans, where I'm trying to remember if Jorah did they go to Volantis first? Because then it's like life. They went to Bear Island, and then I'm trying to think. Bunch of exile. I'm trying to think here if they go to Lice or if they go to Volantis, because that's the significant thing. So they went to Lice. Okay. So I mean, there's similarity. I mean, Jorah eventually lives in Volantis, which is based on New Orleans, but like, when he first goes to Lice. So I mean, there's some similarities in the sense that they like, end up in a similar city, and that he's put on he's made poor. I mean, I have no idea. I've never heard George mention it. Obviously, there's some similarities. I don't know if it's coincidence or not, but it's it's funny. It's I don't know if women spending men out of house and home is not exactly a rare plot in stuff, right? I think that's a kind of a trope at some point, but you never know. thoughts on a potential Chinese invasion of Taiwan. I get asked this almost every stream. No, I mean, I don't think it's gonna happen. Obviously, this is like a fear that everybody has. But I don't think that it's going to happen because Taiwan is an island with really big mountains, and it's really, really difficult to invade something like that. Uh, like China currently does not have like the fleet to like land troops, like land ground forces, like say that we did like the beaches of Normandy. Um, and so they would have to like China would have to first like develop that fleet, and then like they would need a lot of people, a lot of people. I mean, keep in mind that like there's a general rule in the military that if you're the attacking force, you have to have 3 times more forces than the defending force, because the defending force has, you know, bunkers and they don't have long like supply lines and things like that. The Chinese would need but it's an island. It's even worse. It's not even, that's for land situations. Like, and so you're talking like, I think the only, there was, I think the U.S. during World War II had made a plan about invading Taiwan and taking it from the Japanese. And they were counting on like a 10-to-1 ratio of soldiers of American soldiers to Japanese soldiers. So the Chinese military is just not that big. Like it's big, but it's not that big. Like you'd need a lot of people. And I think when people look at Ukraine and Russia's complete and utter failure with Ukraine, I think it probably put fear in people's heart, in fear in people's hearts. But I think one, I don't think China is going to screw up and do something like that. It would take a really dumb move. China is not quite as dictatorial as, say, Russia, where Putin making a bad choice like leads to stuff. There's a larger kind of group of people keeping people in check. Now that said, like Xi is unprecedented in the amount of power that he's achieved when it comes to a Chinese leader since Mao. He's the most powerful Chinese leader since Mao, but in its consolidation of power, but he's still not like that absolute. But just logistically, it's just so difficult. So difficult. Now, China can cause a whole bunch of trouble. They can blockade Taiwan. They could bomb Taiwan. They can do things like that. But actually, like landing and ground, like getting forces out, it's such a hard task. Such a hard task. They'd never be able to achieve it. They'd never be able to achieve it. To invade a mountainous country by sea, never. It's just not something you could see happening. It would be a really dumb move. Just be a really dumb move. Not that they couldn't cause a lot of trouble, but because a lot of people talk about like blockading, like what happens if they blockade Taiwan? Because now the United States can't get their ships in to like help Taiwan. Taiwan can't, get supplies. Like they try to starve them out or something like that. But an actual like invasion, it's just, I don't know. They couldn't do it. Without good proof for the people of Westeros, R+L J is meaningless. But what proof could there be? A proof in the show was very weak. So I agree with you that I think that so R+L J, I think it's dumb in the sense that like one, like not that many people would care, but even if it were true, how do you prove it? And so the fandom back in the days of R+L J like worship, where they just talked about it all day, this came up a lot. Like what proof would there be? And the fan headcanon answer, I swear to God, it's like it's really detailed that in the crypts of Winterfell, there's Rhaegar's harp and like a will and testament, and like the reason like why Lyanna's statue is there is that like within the statue there's actually like a harp and like a will and testament like claiming that like Jon is like a legitimate like son, like, and that the promise me Ned was like Ned like setting up all of this like in the crypts, like actual proof of everything, that this was yeah um which of course like he set all that up and then sent Jon to the wall. Like it's yeah, but I mean, well, because Lyanna wanted it. Now, I mean, this is how this is how like crazy the headcanon was. That, oh, there's something, and this is the reason why Jon has all these dreams about the Winterfell crypts, that he needs to go down there and find like the proof, the harp and the will, like this, like you know, rather than the dreams just being like that the kings of Westeros are like, you don't belong here, you know. So it's a yeah, it's a and him not belonging there being the reason he doesn't accept Stannis's offer, like, you know. But there's this like long fan canon, like fan headcanon like belief that this was the thing, and like they're like for many years people just believed this as fact. Like, no, there's like a harp down there and like a will, then it'll be proof for everyone, you know. And all sorts of people are like, but what about the fact that he's a like Rhaegar was already married, and they're like, oh, Targaryen exceptionalism, everyone will just accept Targaryen exceptionalism. Like, really? Like, he was, you know, they can marry twice. Save for spicy politics later. For greater macroeconomic growth and late stage capitalism in the United States, what would you suggest? FDR style fiscal policy with Teddy Roosevelt breaking of monopolies? You the best. I think this is for the most part like the end state of all like Western liberal democracies, like that you have essentially you have capitalism, but then you have socialism for situations where markets fail. You have a robust social programs and progressive tax structure to help the poor and like increase opportunity. And that for situations like monopolies, like you break the government comes in and breaks them up. Now we're entering a kind of like odd state, the West, the whole world actually, where I would say that like single billionaires, like individual crazy billionaires, are now destabilizing force, which is not, you know, an odd thing. You know, you kind of want an economic system where all of the big shocks, like the regular world, like the natural world, like has big ups and downs. So the idea is that like with monetary policy and fiscal policy, when there is a big boom and you have inflation, you can cool down everything through interest rates, you know, shifting your interest rates. Or if there's a depression, through spending and, you know, fiscal policy, you can pull them out. And then you can take those big waves of instability and smooth them out and make a more stable world. I think we're running into a weird time now where individual like nutso people with too much money can cause big instability, and it's only going to get worse. And I'm talking like obviously about Elon Musk, where like one individual can do something like buy Twitter, which is an important part of media and like functioning of democracy, like, and then destroy it and like lay off tens of thousands of people. Is it tens of thousands? It might be tens of thousands, but it's thousands. Lay off thousands of people immediately and just like move around like millions of dollars, like billions of dollars in huge, like jarring movements. And in that sense, it's like society shouldn't want that kind of like big movements, right? Like society should want stability. And so I kind of feel like there needs to be some sort of movement later. It'll probably just be like taxing rich people more, but even if you start taxing rich people a lot more, I don't know if those billionaires are going to disappear. So I think we're hitting a moment of instability where I'm not saying all billionaires act like this. Most billionaires are rational, but the thing is like you only need a few, right? You only need a few to be just nuts and do something really to really shake the boat, rock the boat, to piss people off. Anyway, I'm not talking about the Vale as a whole, just Royce, and one is not a schemer, not even Ned. Maybe he's still upset Tywin offered up his dwarf. I think I mean, House Royce by itself is definitely an odd, suspicious house. You know, you've got for some reason one guy who joins the Night's Watch. You have another guy who's joining the Rainbow Guard. Um, you know, it's they're all over the map. You know, House Royce, and you know, I'm not really sure what George was intending with them, or if he just wanted to throw out the name because he knows the name is important and the name needs to be out there, and so he wanted to introduce that name early. But yeah, um, oh yeah, Tywin offered Tyrion a marriage to House Royce, and they were offended. Perhaps that's why. Yeah. I mean, I imagine that they'd be they'd be offended. I mean, keep in mind, like people, it's such a contradiction because, like, on the one hand, it's like the dude's rich, but like the fact that like Tyrion is getting offers like Lolly Stokeworth and stuff, um, and they get offended when it's somebody like an actual non mentally challenged individual. Um, but yeah, I mean, no, certainly the junior house Royce were super schemers. We'd like to think that there's something going on with the Royce. Like why? I you know I've read a lot of people bring up the weirdness of House Royce being everywhere, but no one has ever. I've never seen anyone put forward a cohesive theory on like what House Royce is doing and why they're doing it. Um, so not the hippie jocks. What subculture group of teens did you hang out with? I mean, when I was in high school, we we like to, I think there was the alterno kids, the punk rock kids. Um, uh, they existed. I hung out with them. I went to shows and stuff, and punk rock was a big part of my high school and life, and um, so it was funny though. Once there was this fight where, God, I remember this fight, and like one guy had a lacrosse stick and the other guy had his wallet chain and was spinning it around, and they were like battling each other. It's like, oh, it's like a video game where they have like weapons of choice. Like, which weapon will you choose? It's like lacrosse stick, wallet chain, and there was like battle. But that really happened, So, man, it's so funny how behind I am. Like getting discussions like, oh, like an hour more ago. I'm sorry. Um, For Tumco Low, could it be a fake out? Barristan is in a boss fight. Boss ignores Tumco, just standard bearer. When then Tumco saves Barristan. So what Modern Synthesis is talking about here is one of the last week when I brought up a really weird plot hole. Maybe not a plot hole, but just Barristan being an idiot. So like Barristan has a bunch of squires after that he's been training, and he decides that the three best are ready for battle: Tumco Low, Larak the Lash, and the Red Lamb. And Tumco Low is he says the best natural swordsman he's ever seen since Jaime Lannister. Like, that's the compliment he gives to this kid, right? And then before the battle, he makes him standard bearer. And Larrick the Last standard bearer too. His two best fighters are standard bearers. Meaning they're not fighting. They're holding that banner and they got a shield, right? You don't like it's a very dangerous, risky position. Now, for my theorizing with the Battle of Fire, I think that in Barristan 1, when he's preparing, he starts talking about everything. And we've got our standard bearers, and he tells people, like, when you hear the horn, head for the flag and head for our banner and everything. And the red lamb is the horn blower. And so you're like, oh, great, okay. We've introduced banners and we've introduced horns. And then you kind of go to the Victorian story, and he's got a big horn, and there's a big thing about him, like, flying Targaryen banners. In fact, that's in the fan report from the first Tyrion chapter. Like, it's a big deal that it ends with Jorah saying, "Oh, they're flying like Targaryen banners." So banners and horns. Like, it seems like there's going to be confusion, right? That, like, somebody is going to be heading towards those banners rather than Tumco Low and Larrick the Lash's banners. And actually, even in the battle, in the fan reports of Barristan 2, we already hear that the Stormcrow's banner man is killed and brought down. So yeah, I think that there's a reason why I think at some point Tumco Low is going to drop that banner. Now, is he going to drop the banner because he dies? We know that Larrick the Lash takes an arrow to the chest in the fan report for Barristan 2. So at least that's two banners down. So, like, Stormcrow's banner, Larrick the Lash hasn't fallen, but it's still, like, he shakes it off and keeps going. But he's got an arrow in his chest. So yeah, like, Tumco, he's either going to die or he realizes Barristan's in trouble, drops the banner, pulls out his sword to rescue Barristan. Which, yeah, I think that's a very good possibility. It's something I thought of, something I was thinking about putting in the fanfic, to have Barristan survive and saved, but, like, a fake out death. Like, you all think that he's going to be, because I do think he's going to be attacked by the pit fighters. The pit fighters, like, have every reason to hate Barristan, and he goes out there dressed in armor, and they have every reason to just attack him in the middle of the battlefield. So I kind of feel that, like, the pit fighters are going to attack Barristan, and maybe Tumco Low is going to save him, but he's going to drop that banner. And once that banner's dropped, they've got no banners to go to except Victorians. And that's going to change everything, So, man, we're back talking. It's still in Jimmy Buffett talk, man. Oh. What do you think of the ramifications of Massey going to Braavos with news of Arya possibly bringing Jane due to the chaos at the Wall? The thing about Massey is he's a long way from the Wall, and then once he gets to the Wall, he's a long way from Eastwatch, and then from Eastwatch he's a long way from Braavos. So best case scenario, he gets to the Wall in 3 weeks. He gets to Eastwatch a week later, and then he gets on a ship and he takes another 2 weeks to get to Braavos. He gets there in a month and a half. That's best case scenario. Now, that would possibly put him into the Arya storyline, because we kind of know that Mercy takes place pretty late. We know that Mercy takes place at least 1 month after epilogue of A Dance with Dragons. So if best case scenario, like the thing is, like Massey's got a lot of stuff in his way. Like he's got the whole, like possibly armies marching south, chaos at the wall, all sorts of stuff. But you know, maybe he can make it. Maybe he can make it. But say he gets by everything and he gets there. Um, what are the ramifications? Well, it's weird because would he still be thinking Stannis is dead at that point? But then he says, "Oh, I'm just got to raise everything for Shireen," but then Shireen has to still be alive by the time he leaves, so she can't be burned or anything like that. Massey going to Bravo, like I don't know if, like, I'm trying to think if like Arya specifically would be like noteworthy news. You know, when they talk about, I mean, he would have Arya with her. Maybe he would take Arya with him, and he would have Jane, and then Arya, like, could Arya run into Jane Poole or hear about like Braavosi nobles like housing Arya Stark? Like that would be somewhat interesting. That'd be somewhat interesting. Um, that if Massey like comes to Bravos and like stays with a lord who's housing Arya, um, that would be something. Maybe that could work. It could work timeline wise, but Justin Massey would have to get by everybody. Interesting. I'm trying to think if it would affect like who that, because at that point, like, are they still gonna, is the Bank of Bravos still gonna like support Stannis? Because you know, obviously Justin Massey can't get 10,000 cell swords. It's a ridiculous like request, but you know, would what would happen? Um, you know, would the Faceless Men be against that? Would they try to kill him or something like that? That'd be an interesting little story. I mean, I'm just like playing with it in the head. Like, say the Faceless Men now target Justin Massey, um, because they don't want Stannis to get his army. You know, and Justin Massey is there with Jane Poole as the other Arya, and Arya has to show up and like kill him. It'd be something. That'd be crazy. Be crazy kind of stuff. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of possibilities there. A lot of possibilities there. A lot of fun that could be that could be had. FYI, can we see your cursor on maps annotations? Yeah, I think but this is way back, but yeah. I think I can. Let me see if I can do. By the way, this is just like I can do text overlay. Let's see here. Let me see here. By the way, this is like way back. Um it's like can I change this fast enough to like make this, is this, does this become white? Oh, I get to, why did I even do tie it? If you want to know Battle of the Blackwater really quick. Why did I change it to Tyrion again? No, I did Tywin save. There we go. So like Tywin is like here, you know, and then like and then we got, is this better? Is this gonna be some cool stuff? Can I do this? Oh man. Let's do my okay. Okay. T. All right. So here's my here's my animation of the Battle of the Blackwater. So Stannis ends up killing Renly, getting all of his forces here, right? The I suppose the Tyrells leave, or at least Loras does. Maybe the rest of the Tyrell army is back here, because he mainly has Stormlanders. Imry is supposed to go by ship, but he gets caught up in storms, and so he's delayed. So he can't send any scouts. So he's got to go straight into King's Landing. Stannis is coming up by land, waiting. He actually gets there first. They talk about Stannis being impatient, wondering where Imry was. Tywin, he decides he's somewhere around here. He's Harrenhal. He decides that, like, he makes the deal, goes to the headwaters of the Blackwater Rush, meets up with the Tyrells who give him some rafts. They come down the Blackwater Rush, come behind Stannis. Imry comes in, gets trapped, gets his fleet burned because he didn't have the scouts destroyed. Stannis, is trying to cross the bridge of ships, doing all that. Then Tywin's forces and the Tyrells are with him, all come in and get rid of Stannis. Stannis flees back to Dragonstone, and really he come on, like, he didn't have any scouts checking out that chain and that tower and everything. But this is pretty fun. I could do a lot with this kind of stuff. There'd be some fun stuff with like explaining the North and everything with this. Anyway, that's more or less Blackwater right there. But I think that's it. Because before, so on my screen I actually have a big, like, cursor, but, like, it doesn't necessarily appear in the for you guys. Hold on. So that all works. Okay. Yes, this is the real-time map annotation we've been waiting for. Good. That's what I was talking about. Okay. Stannis says to Theon, "What battles has the Battle of Bolton ever won that I should fear him?" Is George R. R. Martin telling us that Stannis will lose the Battle of Ice? I think that yes, that's the hint, that like, at least maybe Stannis will win it first, but eventually that Ramsay will eventually defeat Stannis. That it's just Stannis being a little arrogant, like, and Theon, like, being like, you should totally fear this guy. And he's right, So I do kind of think that, like, something will happen. Like, Stannis will win at the Crofters Village, but then something else will happen. When I analyze Winterfell and I see that like whether Ramsay intended this or not, or if it's a coincidence, like, he sent out the anti-Ramsay people. He sent out Manderly and he sent out the Freys, because the Freys are going to be pro-Roose. Absolutely pro-Roose to the end. They're going to be anti-Ramsay, and the Freys are the hugest force there. So the Boltons are the hugest force. So the idea is that, like, if Roose is dead, the Bolton forces go to Ramsay. Now, if Roose is dead, the Frey forces leave. So or fight Ramsay. So, like, he might as well throw the Frey forces out. And so there's definitely some maneuvering. There's definitely, like, elements where you can see, like, Ramsay, like, taking control and perhaps winning, So, when you see the show, and the show is like this anchor where you're like, well, is it going to be like the show? And you see elements and you're like, well, there's hints that it could be like the show. So, Have you read Teeth of the Rising Sun by Can't Use? Muddy Fields at Storm's End, stakes to funnel cavalry, use of Lightbringer to scare the horses at dawn. Stannis had a plan to defeat Renly. I have read the essay. So essentially, because at the beginning of the stream we talked about how Stannis's plan was to blind his opposition with the rising sun, and so he kind of there's discussion of whether or not, so because blinding his opposition was in his mind, Can't Use theorizes that like during the Battle of Ice, Stannis will bring out Lightbringer and blind his opposition with the sword, and so they won't be able to really like see, or perhaps the night lamp theory, the idea is that the flame atop the Croftwood village or can be transferred somewhere else and be blinding and disorient people, but that it's the same kind of idea, that it's in Stannis's head. But now look, like, does Stannis have a defensive, like back at Storm's End, did Stannis have a defensible position? Sure. Could he take on twice as many men? Sure. Could he take on 3 times as many men? Sure. There's lots of things that you can use in a defensive situation to fight, incoming cavalry. But I just I don't think it would win. He could win against that much. Like, Renly's forces were crazy huge, and so it's he just got lucky. He got lucky that Melisandre saved him at Storm's End. He was being dumb, and then Cantius thinks he's going to use the same strategy and those same techniques, like up in the Battle of Ice, with the battle at the Crofters Village. Okay, here we go. I watched your time traveling Bran series. Does a new time traveling Bran get created every time Bran dies? What happens to the previous one? Is time traveling Bran immortal? What can kill it? So I played with these different theories about what time traveling Bran is. So it's either, and I kind of split on which it is. I think it makes perhaps an easier, better story if it's the latter thing I'm going to talk about. So in time travel, the time traveling Bran theory is essentially that either Bran is going along in the timeline and a time traveling Bran is going along parallel with him, guiding him, and then when they get to the time travel point, Bran goes back in time and becomes the new time traveling Bran for Bran on their next iteration, on their next try. And so you constantly just have one Bran going back, becoming time traveling Bran each time. However, if it were just that, time traveling Bran would not be that much smarter than regular Bran, So you kind of have this idea that like he perhaps melds, or time traveling Bran melds with Bran as it goes back. Now, this idea of like Second Life, you only get one more time to go back, which goes with the first theory. But the idea that like time traveling Bran is actually this like blob collecting Brans and going back and collecting more and more Brans. One, it kind of like gets into the werewood net and the House of the Undying and things like that, like a receptacle for souls. And that time traveling Bran is perhaps a collection of 1,000 time traveling Brans, 1,000 Brans, which fits better to the idea that like when Bran had his dream, he looked over and saw like 1,000 dead dreamers. And so if it were only one Bran, he wouldn't know it was 1,000 times, So I'm kind of lean towards the blob. I kind of lean towards the time traveling collective blob picking up Brans over and over again rather than just one Bran, So, and so if, say, Bran, Now that's the other thing is if Bran refuses to go back in time, the blob still exists, but he's in the tree. You know, the time traveling Bran has to exist somewhere, so maybe he's in the werewood net. And so if the werewood net gets destroyed, time traveling Bran could die because if he's residing in the werewood net. Like if we're looking at like the show, for example, as an example, like when the Night's King comes down and destroys Bloodraven, like would he destroy that tree? Would he burn that tree? And if he burned that tree, would he destroy all time traveling Brands, or could the time traveling Brands escape in the werewood net and go to other werewoods? Or would other werewoods have other time traveling Brands from other previous attempts? there's like maybe many time traveling Brand blobs out there. We rapidly get into Kang the Conqueror kind of territory here, right? But yeah, I tend to think it's a blob. I tend to think it's a big blob, big time traveling blob of consciousness. How do the Greyjoys work together as a family? So earlier in the stream, I talked about how the Lannisters like almost perfectly like work together as a family. The even though they don't like each other, so how the Greyjoys just they do not work together at all. It seems like everything they do screws up each other's plans. Like Theon comes in with a really good plan. Like he's like, hey, let's attack the Lannisters and we'll get Casterly Rock. Like, and he's like, no, we're going to go for the North. You're like, okay, I'm going to conquer the North and then just hope Tywin will let us have it. It's just, no, Tywin's not going to do that. But he pulls that plan off. He does that plan, and then Theon screws it up by attacking Winterfell. And then they go and they have their king's moot. I mean, I suppose, and everything is just horrible. But and then everybody tries to undermine each other. Victarion tries to undermine Euron. Aeron's trying to undermine Euron. Euron is trying to kill Asha. I suppose the Tyrion did kind of screw up the Lannisters too, though. I mean, he did go and kill Tywin. So it's these families all just kind of screw each other up. Maester Luwin made a clay figurine of Bran, flung him off the wall to show that what would happen if he fell. Luwin was casting dark magic on Bran and using the golem. It is 100% to blame for the fall and crippling him. That would be something. It's kind of a funny, it's kind of a weird random scene, right? Like, Maester Luwin, like, spends all of this time, like, saying, if you fall, you're going to die, Bran. Yeah. How can we convince him? I'm going to make a clay mannequin and then toss the clay mannequin off the tower and have it explode to try to convince the boy. Like, you could have just brought a sheep up or something. Like, you could have done something. Like, spending all this time, like making this big, like, mannequin. Something else. I mean, something else would break. It was a really over the top thing that Luwin did. I mean, you are right. It's just one of these like really weird, crazy moments. Like, why did he do that? Have you read a collection of unmitigated pedantry series about the Dothraki? I think I read the one. If the one I'm thinking of, I read one on the Arak and how the Arak is a really stupid weapon. I think that was this series. but there's probably much more. Um, Horse fiddles. I've not read them all.
Yeah, this was definitely the.
I think it was on the Arak, but I have to read more on this because this seems very funny. I'm going to have to read this later. But a collection of unmitigated pedantry on Dothraki. But yeah, it's in general there is this uh, trope of the warrior culture that exists in fiction, whether it be Vikings, like Vikings didn't exist as we think of them in popular culture, or whether it be Klingons or whoever. There's always this like warrior culture, right? That's like so focused on being that, which is ridiculous because like all cultures need, you know, agriculture, like people to raise your horses, people to do livestock, like, you know, you need all of these people. You need like people to find water, like, you know, doctors, religious people, you know, like they can't, everyone can't be a freaking warrior, you know, you just, there's just, doesn't work that way. But they love to have it in series that, oh, these are a warrior people. Oh really, you know, as opposed to every other culture on Earth that doesn't have warriors, like the pacifist society, like, you know, like there's every society has armies, like every society, like, or else if they didn't, they'd not exist very quickly, you know. Um, Ironborn men come in two flavors. The most grizzled dudes ever. Oh, I have a guest. Who's joining me? Oh, V2. Hello, hello. How goes it?
Hey man, how are you?
I'm
I'm
all
good.
right. I'm all right. What's new with you?
Uh, Nothing much. I just bought uh, my first books from Ice and Fire. I
Oh, okay.
always read by PDF.
You know,
So
it's funny because my first were like some paperbacks, and I don't have a good copy either. Um, it's
yeah,
funny because when I met George R. R. Martin, they uh they told us that the dinner we are going to like is not a signing session, so don't bring books for him to sign. They like, I was like, okay. But then when I went, everyone had brought their books and he was signing them. And so like a bunch of people had brought their like first edition Game of Thrones and stuff, and he signed them. And I was like, oh geez, I guess I
of course.
should have bought a book for him to read. And when he was with it, he's like, you don't have anything for me to sign? I was like, you can sign our menu. And he's like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't. I just. I don't have a good copy. I don't have a good copy, which is
Yeah,
funny
me neither.
because I do end up reading the electronic or audiobook or something more often.
Yeah,
Um,
I was into this, but I bought the one that are like pocket books, although they're huge because of course they're huge. Yeah,
yeah,
got
yeah,
them used, so really cheap. Yeah.
that's good. That's good. I always thought about that. Like I'm like, how what's the first edition Game of Thrones? I think they go for like $400.
Oof.
What? This guy's trying to sell first editions for like $20,000. It's like, come on,
Jeez.
come on.
Ah, those speculators, man, everywhere.
I know. Um, that's ridiculous. What's this guy's set of all the first editions? £2,000. Uh, that's more reasonable. That's more reasonable. Um, yeah. Okay, so Ironborn come in two flavors: the most grizzled dudes ever, or in the case of Euron, Theon, Carl, and Christopher, boy band members. So I'm convinced that although the show like makes the Ironborn into just all Vikings, George is slightly more nuanced than this, slightly more, and
I think
that
he's way more.
yeah. I mean, obviously as Roderick the Reader, but like I'm saying, like in the first the Drowned Man chapter, like like he's walking across, he travels across like the islands, and he's meeting like dudes who are just regular lords who like farm or mine, and he's like, and Aaron is thinking to himself, oh, these guys aren't real Ironborn. Now, certainly when we run into like the dudes on Victarion's ship,
Bunch of posers.
yeah, you get these nutsos, you know, when the people that hang around Victarion, when he like goes into the bar and they're playing they're finger dancing and stuff like that with axes and stuff. You get people like that, but um, you know, the average Joe, I mean, they've got to do that stuff. I suppose the same thing happened with like Rob in the North. Like, oh, you're gonna runs into Great Job Umber, and then Great Job Umber gets mauled by a direwolf, and then is like, aha, this is great. Your meat is tough, you know, like. Yeah, but somebody's got to be farming, right? Somebody's got to be like washing your clothes. You can't all be badasses, you know. So it's something like that. They got to be fishermen, you know. So, but I do agree.
It makes Asha more interesting because like all her support group is like this non-Viking stereotypical, but she herself like wants to be this or is but gender bent.
Yeah, but you hear a little bit about the Botleys and the Black Tides and things like that, and how there can be some differences between them, like followers of the Faith of the Seven, people that are more interested in not being knights and stuff like that, and Greenlander ways and stuff. So you know, it it goes it goes back and forth. I think George does want to have it both ways.
I wonder like how Cleftjaw and his group is in this
Uh,
sense.
oh, absolutely. I mean, Cleftjaw. I'd love to visit them again, have them back as quickly as possible. Probably in Theon 2. Theon 2, probably where Cleftjaw is going to make his appearance.
I have an outline for Theon too. Before the it's like a small chapter between Theon one and the Dreadfort. It's like
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
with Dagmar in Torrent Square.
All in all, A Song of Ice and Fire is just George R. R. Martin stuffing every goddamn trope in fantasy: vampires, werewolves, witches, pirates, dragons, Vikings, mermen, even dwarves, Tyrians, and basically elves, Targaryens. No, it is a lot of that. It's sort of like Marvel. Marvel does this as well. Like, we're trying to throw in every idea we have, so we're gonna just shove in everything we can think of. Now, I think the Tyrion thing is funny because, um, obviously, like George R. R. Martin is making an ironic joke about Tyrion being a dwarf and sometimes acting like a dwarf, like fighting with a battle axe, but he's a dwarf in a fantasy book, but he's not a dwarf, like um but it's also very interesting because like Tyrion was originally in his plan not a dwarf, and he had then shoved in a dwarf character from his previous sci-fi story Under Siege, um, and it fit perfectly. He must have been having like, that must have been just one of those days where he was like, oh my god, this is genius, because he's like sitting there and he's like, what if I take in that dwarf character from my previous story and I make him a dwarf in a fantasy book? Oh my god. And he that must have been a great day like for him, right? Like, you just be like, what an idea. He had the pieces. um and then he made that connection, and it worked out. Everybody should read Under Siege because it's just ridiculous seeing Tyrion before Tyrion. um but yes. Been rewatching your Night's Watch series. War of the Raven, in my opinion, is your best. You said last week that you're now thinking it's all time traveling Bran, but surely Bloodraven is still involved. What do you think was what do you think was Bloodraven, and what was time traveling Bran? I think Bloodraven. So I think when you look at it like the events in the Targaryen family tree, and that are weird and suspicious, where like Targaryens are randomly dying for weird reasons to bring about a certain person to be king. Or, I think that's Bloodraven's actions, when we're talking about like Egg, for example, becoming king. When Aerys choosing not to have children, or people's heads smashed in at tourneys. So I think Bloodraven was certainly trying to manipulate the timeline. I don't know if he was trying to make prophecy come true or stop prophecy from coming true. And so I think that, and perhaps I think there was some scheming to bring about Kat and Ned producing a child. I think he kind of knows that these are two people with good genes. If we pop them together, maybe we'll get a green seer because I need someone to replace me. So I think there is some scheming going on beforehand. That's Bloodraven. But I think once you get to the modern story, when there's just like so much dream sending all over the place, and dragons popping up here and there, and Jaime getting sent weird visions, and Lancel getting sent weird visions, that I think you start getting out of like Bloodraven's like realm, because all we know kind of about Bloodraven is Bloodraven seems interested in Targaryen lineage, and he seems interested in keeping Blackfyres off the throne, and so I don't know how much that relates to like all the rest of the things going on in the story that I can more attribute to time traveling Bran. So yeah, I used to think it was Bloodraven everything, but now I'm thinking like time traveling Bran most of it. Bloodraven a little bit,
Yeah, what before Bran is born is Bloodraven,
Yeah,
like
definitely.
Craster and stuff.
Yeah, though some people would say, the people that believe that like Bran the Builder is time traveling Bran, and Bran made the Mad King Aerys mad and things like that. There's definitely people that have those kind of ideas that time traveling Bran is eternal. Um, um, if you were limited to George's 2 more book outline, if you weren't limited to George's 2 more book outline, how many would you take to wrap up the fanfic? If you had an extra book or 2, what would you change? Look, if here's like a couple like different things. Like one, like I look at doing the fanfic is incredibly difficult. It's incredibly difficult to find people that have like the time, and to have me find time putting things together and stuff like that, and I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do this. Like it's that difficult. Like there's definitely times where I'm just like, oh my god, this is just like overwhelming. Like to try to put this in George's voice. I'm never going to be able to get this in George's voice. The schedule, we're not putting out these chapters fast enough. I'm never going to get this done. Like there's a lot of like that kind of feeling. And so like when I say like 2 books, like I'm like already for me, that's like way too many, where I'm just like, oh my God, like if that would take me like 16 years, like, like at the rate I'm going, so in that sense, like I wouldn't personally want to do more with my current life. Now, if someone said, hey, here is a bunch of money, you hire the people you need to hire, and you sit in a room and you work it out, and this is your job, and you have like the resources to do it, yeah, I would add another book. Like I would think 8 books would be better and sufficient to wrap up the story than 7. Like I think 7 is rushed, and 8 is probably a would be a better amount. But like, in the sense of like what like one's own life, like objectively, like when I look at the story, like things are still expanding out so much. Like, would it be nice to have 3 books to bring things back together rather than just 2? Yeah, like 8 books would be better. But when looking at like life and logistics and like trying to do this project, like already 2 books is like so many. Just focusing at like seeing how far I can get on one book, like, V2, you know what I'm talking about. It's fucking exhausting, like looking over
Yeah,
everything.
yeah, yeah. It is.
And and, and
I
no
agree.
chapter
Agree.
is ever done. Like everything can always be better, you know.
Yes. Do you? This is a good question I have. Is there any chapter already made by us that you think you maybe will have to rewrite?
I don't. I mean, I don't at this point. No, I mean, I could say that like maybe Daenerys could like like do some extra editing, but Daenerys is fine. It's fine.
I like
Um,
Daenerys a lot.
yeah, like obviously everything could be better. Everything could be better, but like if we did them again, if we re-edit them again, it would take so much time. I'd have to re-record everything again. Like, you know, again, if we had
I was thinking
infinite
less
time
of.
and infinite resources,
I would think of less of on editing and more on plot.
yeah.
You know, like a new Marinese knot or something like that that you need. Oh fuck, timeline doesn't fit. I
for
have to
me,
to.
for us, I don't think plot is the problem. Like, there's so many. Like, I think I'm perfectly like the things I'm capable of that I have no anxiety about is wrapping up all of the loose ends. The thing that I don't think maybe George can do. Like, I know where all the I vaguely know where all of the strings are, and the ones I forget, the rest of you guys, the rest of the editors will point out and be like, "Oh, right, that those two." I'm pretty confident that I'd be able to pull together all of the threads, um, into a story that would work out. The thing I have anxiety about is like making it good and in George's tone. Like that would just like it's so exhausting and daunting to do. That's the tough part. Is making it emotionally, impactful and like being good, you know. Um, but
Yeah.
I'm pretty confident I can bring the story together. Uh, but which is something that everybody thinks George can't do. Like, how are you gonna resolve all these plots? Well, you know, we'll see. We'll see. Um, what do you think will be the general outline of the Winds of Winter? Where do you see it ending? Um, it's only speculation because like George has never been able to wrap anything up. Um, so like realistically, like so for example, for the fanfic, where do I see like the outline of the Winds of Winter? I would say on a fundamental level, all plots move south of the Wall. All plots move out of Essos. Like that's like just the general nature of the story. Like have Daenerys land in Westeros by the end of the story. Have the Wall perhaps breached by the end of the story. Um, and everything resolved north of the Wall, everything resolved in Essos. Like I think that's a very good like general outline on how things go. Have John Con take power over most of Westeros by the time the Winds of Winter is over, um, and have the Vale and Dorne like do something. I think that's in a general sense what the outline is, and in a general sense, I think that's what George would probably plan too. But the thing is, like, knowing George, he would just write, and then like we open the Winds of Winter, and you're still like, how is the story still growing? Like, oh my god, like if the Winds of Winter came out tomorrow, I guarantee it would not be as clean as what I like just described. Like, I guarantee like there'd be so many plot lines that are still expanding, and everyone would still be scratching their heads, going, "What? How is he going to wrap this up? Like, like how? Like, I just guarantee that's just how it is." And his previous stories, and I'm going with Dying of the Light, Fever Dream, Armageddon Rag, they all wrap up really fast. They expand really far and then wrap up fast, almost too fast. So I would almost say that, like, maybe George's plan is to keep expanding till the end of the Winds of Winter and then wrap up book, in his mind, VT, you've read Fever Dream and Armageddon Rag?
I haven't, man.
Oh, really?
I haven't. Yes.
They're fascinating. You should do it sometime.
I've only read some shorts. 7 Times Never Kill Man, Song for Leah. Just those two. Yeah.
The well, if you want a quick one, I think Dying of the Light, which is narrated by the actor that is Jorah. That one's just a novella, Ian Glenn. And that one gives you a pretty good idea on how, like, George ends stories and how he wraps things up and stuff. Like, he does like to have like every plot line wrapped up, but he does it very quick. It's when we sort of,
It's on YouTube.
Is it?
I don't know. No. I'm asking. Okay.
No.
On Audible.
I think. Oh, it is on YouTube right now.
Oh, great.
It probably won't be for that. It probably won't be for that long. Uploaded 3 weeks ago.
Oh,
Dying of the Light by George.
Yeah.
Okay.
This one is read by Dale Carter. But the because I know that I think I had found it on SoundCloud for a while, but it might have been brought down. Dying of the Light, but Dying of the Light is currently on YouTube, and I'm trying to think. Let's see if I can. Where is there a search? No. I'm trying to think. Let's see here. It is on SoundCloud. Okay. A V2?
Okay.
Go to SoundCloud and you're gonna look for the artist. You're gonna search for the artist Frank Decker. Frank Decker, and Dying of the Light, the audiobook is there. So
I found it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Is that just the first 3 chapters? I don't know, but nonetheless.
No, half an hour shouldn't be all of it.
Yeah.
3 chapters. Yes.
but nonetheless, there's some of it.
Oh,
Um,
yep.
but anyway, Dying of the Light. It's a good way to know. I mean, at least start with that one, and then you can finish with the one on YouTube. But it gives you a
Sure.
very good idea of how George ends stories and how he wraps things up, like how much he expands a world and then how much he collapses it. um, let's see here. Thank you, Heather. I appreciate it. Thank you, Zed. Zach, do you see any parallel between A Song of Ice and Fire and Bidenomics, depleting natural strategic reserves to keep the price of commodity oil less than 80 barrels to subsidize gas for re-election? Um, I don't know if that's Bidenomics. What we know that see, people always talk about like trying to manipulate um, oil prices before elections in order and stuff. People talk about this, but I don't know if anyone's ever been really successful in doing it. I know that Trump had a discussion with the Saudis where he tried to do this. I don't know if they were actually very successful, and whether when you it's just like prime economies or something by but that's certainly not. I'm trying to think of natural strategic reserve. I mean, this is one of these questions where you're like how long have you been beating your wife kind of stuff. Um, like I don't think that Biden has been known for doing this. Okay, let's see here. According to the news, there's something in here. Biden administration is delaying plans to restock national oil reserve. And the question is when he withdrew 180 barrels in March 2022. All right. Oh, this was to deal with Russia's Ukraine invasion. So this was not to do. So like Bidenomics, which I don't know if there's like this is something that like both Biden's team and like Republicans try to use as this term. I don't think there's anything special about uh, uh, Joe Biden's like economics as a president, but nonetheless, um, both of them both sides try to like paint Biden as some revolutionary in one way or the other. Um, Biden did bring down the strategic oil reserve because of the war in Ukraine, which makes sense. That has less to do with economics and re-election than it does an actual war going on. But all right. Do I see any parallel with A Song of Ice and Fire? No, it's not in there at all. There's no, George is not exactly great with economics. But anyway, nonetheless, a rather silly question. But Moonman, could the Slint plot in A Clash of Kings have been written for Littlefinger, then swapped to his crony when it became clear it was leading to Littlefinger's death? That's a tough question. The early parts of A Clash of Kings were written very early, like before A Game of Thrones was even published. Those early chapters of A Clash of Kings were written and cut from like Game of Thrones. And so it's so I want to say that like what he planned for Slint, was fairly early. But could he have had something for Littlefinger earlier? I don't know, but I just know that like A Clash of Kings what happens in A Clash of Kings, like especially the first half, was thought about relatively early in with his ideas. But I'm trying to think of like, because I mean, you are right that like Slint and Littlefinger have a similar trajectory in the sense that they're both involved in stopping the coup. They're both involved in having Harrenhal. Was there even a need for Janos Slynt to exist? I mean, George.
We
George
need someone commanding the gold cloaks, right? Just because of that, I think.
I guess you needed a gold cloaks, like somebody in charge of the gold cloaks, and I suppose you needed somebody like somewhat related to killing the baby at the brothel to like keep Littlefinger's hands a little clean. But if you wanted to write the story without Janos Slynt, you could probably do it. Or like a decreased role for him. But yeah. But yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting because you are right that their plots are very aligned. Especially considering you're talking about like a death of a baby at a brothel, Harrenhal involved in the coup. There's a lot, but I think maybe it was something to do with like keeping Littlefinger's hands clean. Because if Littlefinger is too involved in the execution of Ned, Sansa's never going to trust him. So he needs to be like a step away. So he needs some sort of proxy. Please explain how you outline, plot, organize your thoughts, plan, and voice when tackling projects like the Winds of Winter. Thank you for all your thoughts and efforts. Looking forward to your brand chapter. So essentially, with the process is, I generally have a broad idea of what I think is going to happen in the next step, and a lot of those I worked out. Some of those I worked out years ago in the Prepping for Winter series, where I'm just like, well, I think this is how that battle's going to go. This is where this chapter seems to be leading. So, I vaguely always had an idea, like for years, I've had an idea of how, say, the Battle of Ice will end, how the Battle of Fire will end, how the Battle of Blood will end, how the Battle of Steel will end. Maybe not specifics, but, just some ideas. Some of the stuff I didn't have any idea on like what to do with Samwell. But then, you talk to people, you formulate ideas, and then you kind of say, okay, I'm going to tackle this. And then you kind of have some general ideas, and you send out then you write a quick outline, and then and then people's submissions come in, and a lot of people have different ideas, and you kind of like change and shift that around. And so right now there's not too much of an outline past like the next step, like one chapter past everybody on in the story. Do I know where like most of these characters are going? Generally no, except for that outline that I kind of talked about, like bring everyone back to Westeros, bring everyone south of the wall, and have John Con mostly conquer Westeros. Like that's more or less like a loose outline, and I kind of have like a more specific, like I know how these various battles will end. Now keep in mind that like just doing that single step leads to half of the book being done. Like like one chapter passed with everyone is practically half the book, or one or two chapters, taking that next step. So after that, it's like, you have the general outline, you get the submissions, and you try to think about the voice. And then, I take the submissions and I try to merge them together, and I work with them, and then I pass them to the editors, and the editors also have they have various specialties as well. Where some editors think about like what plot threads are missing. Some search for consistency. One editor is very good at like finding George's like voice and how he sounds, and you kind of like work with all of these together and try to like produce a story that works in the end. And then I kind of like take it at the end and I like look over it again and tinker it and tinker and tinker and tinker until I feel like it's done. And then I record it, and as I record it and as I'm reading it aloud, like sometimes I realize things are wrong and I've got to change them. And I don't know. That's about it. It's not as organized as like one might think. It's not that organized. But yeah, and Bran has been causing me a lot of anxiety. I guess it causes George a lot of anxiety too. I keep going back and tinkering it with it more because I just don't think it sounds right. But hopefully I'll get it to you guys eventually. Also working on Barristan. Barristan is going to go to the editors soon. So V2, I hope you're excited about reading some Barristan.
I am, and I think you need to be less perfectionist with Bran, man.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
taking too long.
right. It's just
Like-
it's just a random battle. It's just Barristan. Yeah.
It's better to be done and good than to be perfect and never done.
Right, that's absolutely true. You're right. Like it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to exist, and like it's I know. Thank you, Jeffrey Leinenkugel. Leinenkugel, like the Wisconsin beer. Where's Carmine? Carmine's probably asleep, by the way. Carmine, he's a night owl, so he goes to bed. Like sometimes he like contacts me, and I'm like, dude, it's like 7 a.m. for you, which means he like sleeps, probably from the late morning to early afternoon. If there are levels of face changing, is the max level warging animal than human? Why the house in black and white scouted Nymeria used to kill some target. So my general theory on the Arya thing is that it's a little coincidental that a cult that looks for supernatural abilities that has supernatural abilities would seek out Arya, who has supernatural abilities. That there must be something related between like skin changing and face changing. And maybe it's just that like if you have telekinetic abilities and telepathic abilities, they transition to other skills or something like that. But it's a remarkable coincidence, right? Like if it were just random, that because Jaqen is straight up interested in her, like straight up from the beginning. There's no reason for Jaqen to be interested in her unless he sees something that everybody else doesn't. So it's got to be. So I think it's just maybe there's telepathic and telekinetic ability, and then you can like specialize in a certain thing, face changing or skin changing, But I mean, it's funny that it's like linguistically kind of similar, right? Skin changing, face changing. I mean, they're very different things. One is taking your consciousness and shooting it out of your body into an animal and taking control of an animal. And the other is altering your appearance. Like they're fundamentally different, and yet they're using very similar language. But yeah, I think it's something like that. But it's funny, warging animal than human. I mean, it's definitely like that's definitely the case with skin changing, that like it goes from animal to human, that if you're powerful enough you can control a human. But I think it's just, it seems like they're just shifting their face. But yeah, I think the black and white but I don't know if Nymeria is going to be used, though. That would be something. I didn't think about that 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 they actually only care about Arya using the wolf to kill somebody. Huh. They have no interest in actually making her a face, like change her physical appearance. They just want her to use her wolf. I hadn't thought of that. I thought it more in the sense that her telepathic ability was multidisciplined. Huh. I don't know. I'd have to think about who'd Nymeria assassinate. I mean, besides Ilan Payne. I mentioned the kings because you said the government didn't kill Martin like 3 streams ago. If A Song of Ice and Fire is 1,000 Worlds, what planet is it taking place on and when? After an interregnum. Yeah, no, the government did not kill Martin Luther King. Whether the FBI was harassing him and whether they were following him and keeping tabs on him, that's very different from assassinating a dude. No, I don't think the government killed Martin Luther King. So like there's that huge jump. Like FBI was watching somebody doesn't mean the FBI killed them. Like that's the connection. I mean, FBI is their job is to watch people. Their job is not to assassinate people. The FBI has never been used to assassinate people. That's not the function of their organization. I mean, you see the like the big jump, you know, like in it you're taking like something they were doing, watching, which is their job, and jumping it to, you know, something that's not their job, you know. It's like, why should I think that someone that if the FBI is watching someone that they would assassinate them, you know? Like, wouldn't they just arrest them, you know? Like, they have arrest power, right? Like it would be a lot easier to just, like, you know, arrest him on something that he's guilty of, you know, than to kill him. And if they're going to be doing something as crazy as trying to assassinate somebody, why don't they just like arrest them on some trumped up charges? It seems a lot easier. But if 1,000 Worlds, if A Song of Ice and Fire takes place on a planet, where would it be and what? I imagine, like, if you're gonna make it 1,000 Worlds, and I don't think it is, but if it were, like, it would be Earth, like it would be old Earth, quarantined, and you could have it be. I mean, I guess you'd have it past like all the events. I mean, I think the latest story in the universe is Tuf Voyaging, which is around 1,000 AI after interregnum. From Wisdom, what one character from the 1,000 Worlds would be dropped off into Westeros for fun and shenanigans? Places in any book, setting or house. Oh man, let me think. I mean, the most interesting character to be dropped off in A Song of Ice and Fire, in my opinion, would be Cleronimus and his new body. So, for those who know what I'm talking about, in the 1,000 Worlds, is George R. Martin's like universe that he wrote, was a universe that he wrote in many short stories that were not connected. I mean, besides taking place in the same universe, they were not related. Sometimes they took it was a galaxy, 1,000-year time period that the short stories took place on, and they have very little connection to each other, with the exception of a few very tiny historical references every once in a while. So that sometimes they'll mention Stephen Cobalt North Star, and sometimes they'll mention this depressed composer, Lamea Bailiff or something. Tomo and Wahlberg, these explorers, they'll sometimes talk about. You'll hear about different people, but these things are few and far between. And then there was Claronimus, who is also an explorer, who was a big part of the history. And then Claronimus actually shows up in the final Thousand Worlds story that George ever wrote, not counting Avalon, which he never finished, but like called The Glass Flower. And in that story, there is a character, who she is playing body swapping games where she gets gamblers together in a game where they all like take their consciousness and battle each other, and then they end up in each other's bodies, in different bodies at the end. And so this android claiming to be Claronimus, this old hero explorer, shows up and wants to play the body swapping game. And so the protagonist agrees, and Claronimus steals her body. And she ends up in the android, and he ends up in this little girl's body. Now, keep in mind that the protagonist stole that little girl's body from somebody else. It's not her body originally, but Claronimus gets the body in the end to live a new life. And so it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to have a body swapper going around, and then but it'll also be interesting to somebody with that much history and knowledge to kind of show up. It would be fascinating. Greetings from the Czech Republic. Have I told this joke before? V2, have I told this? When I told this joke, what do you call a bohemian who's been kicked out of a bar?
I don't know.
A bounced check. Puns work very poorly cross-culturally. I've told it to Czechs, and they're like, I don't get it. And I'm like, well, you see, to bounce means to kick somebody out of a bar. Bars have bouncers. So if you're bounced, but bounce is when you write a check. That also, people don't use checks anymore. But bounce is when you have a check and you've written it for more than the amount of money that's in your account. So when you use it, the check bounces. And then a bohemian is a check. So a bohemian who's been kicked out of a bar is a bounced check.
Yes.
I don't know. In your experience, how has the legacy of Japanese imperialism affected the culture and the average person in Asian countries that you've been to? This is a fascinating question, because you're so when it comes to China, the Japanese were not in Manchuria too long, and their kind of imprint was dismantled by the Chinese pretty quickly. However, the invasion of by the Japanese, and certainly the rape of Nanjing, is very, very significant to Chinese historically. Like, they're just taught about it in school as this was a horrible thing. And so a lot of times I'd run into like Chinese people, and they'd ask me like, oh, do you like Japanese people? And I'm like, well, some Japanese people are great. Some Japanese people aren't, like anybody else, like any group else. And like a Chinese person will be like, I hate Japanese people. I'd be like, really? Have you ever met one? They'd be like, no. You're like, oh, but you hate them. He's like, that's right, because they hurt China, and you're like, okay. Like, that was a long time ago. Like, like Japanese people took Americans and put them in very cruel prisoner of war camps. Like, it was pretty bad. Like, the Japanese treatment of prisoners of war during the World War II was abysmal. And the United States dropped atomic bombs on Japan. There's plenty of reason for Japanese and Americans to hate each other. However, you ask a Japanese person, how do you feel about Americans? They'd be like, some are good, some are bad. You ask Americans how you feel about Japanese, they'll probably be like, some are good, some are bad. This whole like blanket, like you must hate them because of what they did during World War II. I you see it with the Koreans, and you see it with the Chinese. Like it's definitely taught in their school system and in their culture. Like you need to still maintain this hatred, even though it's been 3 generations. You know, and so in that sense, like the effect is there. Like you know, there is this like hatred of Japan in China and Korea that I don't know, you don't see in other places. Like it's not like you talk to the average French person and they have hatred for the Germans, or you talk, you know, as I say, with the Americans and the Japanese or something like so yeah, Japanese imperialism like definitely is there. Now the Taiwanese are very different. The Taiwanese, despite the Japanese not being exactly so nice during their imperial period, they had comfort women here. They had you know, they were pretty brutal to the Taiwanese. The Taiwanese don't have that hatred of the Japanese. Like they almost have like this respect and thanks to them. They're like, yeah, you know, yeah, it was bad, but you know, it was good that we went through those growing pains. You know, the Japanese taught us a lot. Like they have very different kind of ideas. They're very interested in Japanese culture. There's Japanese stores and that are frequented. Like you know, like the Taiwanese have this very odd admiration for Japanese culture. And maybe it's just because like the Chinese hate the Japanese and therefore the Taiwanese are going to do the opposite. Or maybe like how imperialism affected them worked their, you know, psyche different, you know. Maybe they got Stockholm syndrome or something. But there definitely is some hints of it, you know, in those 3 countries. But it, you know, it's kind of funny. Like I see the remnants of Japanese imperialism more on the ground here in Taiwan than I ever did in, say, China or Korea. But like, but they, I don't know, they don't have the same hatred in Taiwan. But yeah. Episode 3, Season 1 ending. Ned sees Arya fighting and gets a weird look on his face. Time-traveling Bran. Do you think there are scenes in the book show where it's implied that time-traveling Bran is changing things, not Mormon to Raven? So this is a big... so in Season 1 of Game of Thrones, almost all of the episodes end in pretty good cliffhangers, with the exception of like the 3rd episode where like Ned sees Arya like fighting and then gets this like dark look on his face, like, oh no. Now keep in mind, at the time, before the rest of the series came out and like nothing was revealed about anything, people were like, oh gosh, like Ned sees something related to Lyanna. Because, you know, Arya is a lot like Lyanna. Lyanna fights with swords. Lyanna was a tomboy. He's seeing Arya fight with swords, and he's seeing some sort of like foreshadowing of some like bad result that's going to happen. And he's like feeling like worried about it. And like that was the look on his face. And the problem with that is that in the books, either Lyanna was kidnapped by Rhaegar, or she went off with him willingly. And in the show, they revealed that it was willingly. So it had nothing to do with her being a tomboy. It had nothing to do with her fighting with swords or being a good horse rider. Any of that. None of it was revealed. Like none of it. Zero. Like so. Like there is no reason for Ned to be looking at Arya and being like, "Oh, doom and gloom." You know. I mean, he's kind of like Ned is kind of accidentally right, because like it leads to Arya like pursuing like military like a martial background, which gets her wrapped up with the House of Black and White maybe, and then goes off and becomes a nutso psycho. But like he would not get that from like her sword playing with Syrio Forel. So the scene means nothing. The scene means nothing in the end. It's just a weird scene. And so I make jokes about it all the time as this like stupid scene, like, oh no, Arya is sword fighting. What does this mean? It means nothing. It means nothing.
They didn't have anything good to end the episode on. They didn't have an exciting scene, so they added some music behind, and that's it.
Yeah, I know. You're right. That is pretty much it. Or they were like mystery boxing it. Like, oh, we're gonna add something later, and then they never did. But do you think there are scenes in this? Do you think there are scenes in the book and show where it's implied that time traveling Bran is changing things, not Mormont's Raven? Well, I think the big one is a Clash of Kings where Ghost meets the young werewood and has his eye opened. And I understand completely that like at the end of the Clash of Kings, like Bran mentions that he may have seen Ghost, and you're supposed to like maybe just dismiss it as a random meaning that didn't mean anything. But like once you understand that like Bran can time travel, like it's like Bran is opening Ghost's eye for some reason, meaning he's changing the timeline for some reason. Ghost's eye being opened does change things because Jon has a connection with Ghost, which causes him to not accept Stannis' offer and become Lord Commander. So like Jon's trajectory is changed by Ghost's like eye being opened by Bran. So I do think that that's the big one. When it comes to like, Raven stuff, trying to think of a Raven moment. I mean, Mormont's Raven in the election would be my guess. Like once you accept that like the tree with Bran is opening Ghost's eye and Ghost is the one that wants Jon to not join Stannis and be elected, then Mormont's Raven in the kettle becomes complicit in that plan. And so Mormont's Raven has to be time traveling Bran as well, at least at that moment.
I I don't know if Bran needs a physical time traveling. Bran needs a physical like um, anchor to exist, but like ravens live 10 to 15 years. It's possible that Mormont's raven like was born at the exact time as Bran, and past Bran's soul is in there somehow. He's like the
True.
anchor.
I was just thinking of like the werewood telepathically like shooting to Mormont's Raven. But Mormont's Raven is on the other side of the wall. Like there's a lot of things that make it logistically difficult. Or or maybe Mormont's Raven wasn't skin changed and somebody just popped him in the kettle and we still don't know who put him in the kettle. But
And he just likes grain. He just like grain.
I mean, my only guess, really logistically, the only one that could really put him in the kettle is Dolorous Ed, but because we know it's not Sam. But I mean, I guess Maester Aemon, but why would Maester? I guess trying to
Yeah,
think.
it could
Like,
be Aemon, but maybe he's too frail. I think the pot is really big.
that's
The
true.
kettle is really big.
Yeah, I mean, Dolorous Ed was Mormont's previous steward, so like he would have some familiarity with the Raven. So like when the Raven returned, it would probably go to Dolorous Ed. So I don't know. Huh. Um, how do you think the Arya story will end? Well, I think that Arya will kill most of her list, if not all but one. She'll either complete her list or leave one name like not killed. And I think I think she should die, but I don't know if that's in George. George loves Arya-like characters. He loves them, which is why Asha is Arya and Lyanna is Arya, and everybody's freaking Arya. He loves them. He loves them. But occasionally he kills them. He killed in the house in the A Night at the Tarn House. There's an Arya character, and she dies at the end. So maybe she should die, or maybe it will be something like she just jumps on a ship and sails off, or something stupid like the show. But
I think Arya will be forever paranoid that everyone might be a faceless man against her, and this is like the end.
yeah, I mean, realistically, that's she's there's no coming back from what she's done, right? Realistically,
Yeah, yeah.
um,
I don't think she can have a happy ending. This is impossible. Don't know if death, but not a happy ending. She's still gone for that.
hi Preston, have you changed your mind about Littlefinger's end goal? I'm trying to remember now, like what I originally said. My original thing about Littlefinger debt scheme was that he was creating debt to create conflict to um oh, I'm forgetting my own theory. What was Littlefinger? Did he? Because in the show, I remember being disappointed that they were just like, oh, Littlefinger just wants to be on the Iron Throne. I think I had Littlefinger being obsessed with prophecy, right? Like Bael the Bard. Like he thought himself Bael the Bard,
Yeah.
and therefore he wanted to like Baelish Bael the Bard, and he wanted to like kidnap Arya. I mean, not Arya, Sansa, to fulfill that prophecy, and that he thought that there was something special about red hair, and the red hair triggered him and everything, that he thought Cat was the one and now he thinks Sansa's the one, or something like that. I think that was my original theory. um I guess I don't have anything better right now, but I do kind of recognize that um using prophecy as an excuse is kind of lazy, and I recognize that I was kind of being lazy, where I'm just like, well, this doesn't make sense, therefore it must be prophecy. Like Littlefinger's doing a lot of things that don't make any sense. It must be prophecy. So I recognize that it was lazy, but I honestly cannot come up with a better reason for Littlefinger's motivations than prophecy, because he seems very interested in doing things like Bael the Bard, and interested in hair color and things like that. So now some people would say, oh, he's just interested in the red hair because it's like Cat. It's like, okay, but um, you know
I think George doesn't know as well.
probably not. You're right. Mystery boxed. um how do you think Mel will die in the story? Oh, that's a fascinating question. Because the when George has these religious characters, I think he kind of has a lot of them. I think there's two ways that George can have a character go. One is the character realizes that they were wrong and realizes that their whole life was a lie. Or two, to a ridiculous degree, despite the fact that everything facing them like shows the opposite, they just keep going. They just keep going. They keep going with it until it's just sad and pathetic. And so I kind of, I mean, I could see both of those endings with Mel. Like, it's very clear that that all the people that she thinks are Azor Ahai, she switches from like thinking Stannis is Azor Ahai to Jon is Azor Ahai to somebody else is Azor Ahai, and then when she's proven wrong, she just picks another person, and it's just so pathetic and sad that she dies like that, like just you know searching for someone, like, no, the prophecy has to be true, no, and then just keeps going, and you're just like, give it up, lady. Or she like realizes that everything is a lie, and that she's been living a lie, and wants to make up for the fact that she's caused all this trouble, and like, so I think the first case actually is probably more likely, that she's just gonna, even though she's faced with so many things that show that like that she's just been wrong. She's just going to keep going, and her own idiocy is going to like cause her to die because she's just so convinced in something that's so clearly wrong, you know. Versus like her like having some sort of redemption arc. Because George, keep in mind, George is not, he does not really think well of hyper religious people, and so he's, you know, he's not gonna. I don't think Mel is gonna have a great ending. I mean, the show was almost an apology for her. Like, you know what? All those prophecies were okay, and I'm just gonna walk off. I'm sorry for burning that little girl, but I was sort of right in the end, but not completely right. But I'm just gonna kill myself now, you know.
I think her only hope is like being good to Devon, like protecting Devon, so that Davos doesn't turn on her.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe he should kill her. um, when you've said you discuss A Song of Ice and Fire geology, you've said you discuss more A Song of Ice and Fire geology in the past, but you never have Where Do Rocks At, homie. I have my geology video. I think Game of Thrones and geology. Here it is. In case you I mean, he may be saying that he wants me to talk about it more, but here's my geology and Game of Thrones discussion. The and there's a if there's an actual professional geologist who does, if you see the one below, there's like a part 1 and part 2 of this webinar. There's a professor that talks about geology and Game of Thrones. But oh geez, somebody else did a video called Game of Thrones geology and then used nearly the same image I did. How very odd. Huh. Dragonstone Beach. Interesting. Nonetheless, I did once, and besides, like, if those two things, if you listen to the professor's like geology webinar, and he talks about a lot of cool stuff about like he brings up some interesting stuff like so on the map here. Well, he brings up the fact that like it's weird that there's no volcanoes in Westeros except on Dragonstone. Like that's not very much geological activity for a continent. But then he starts talking about the God's Eye, and the God's Eye is interesting in that it's a lake with a island in the middle, and there's a formation that happens when volcanoes collapse. And then I think it's called a caldera. Caldera is the word. And so there's, you know, people are like, oh, could the God's Eye be a caldera? And he's like, well, there's never been a caldera that big in the history of like Earth. But, you know, I think there's some interesting aspects to geology with regards to like gold and the gold and tin trade I talk about in my video, and I think there's some interesting stuff with I think we talk about a little bit of let's see, I don't know, it's a long video. I'm trying to remember. It's been many years, but it's because a geology friend of mine asked me to do a thing, and he's like, can you come up with geology stuff? I'm like, okay, let's do it. And there's some fun stuff in there that I don't know if George just got lucky, but so one big thing, like, and this is something that like historically, like why we have a Bronze Age and why we have an Iron Age, like so tin is heavier than copper. And this is a big deal because if tin is heavier than copper, that means there's less tin in the world than copper. But you need both copper and tin to make bronze. And so, as during the Bronze Age, you know, a civilization would expand out and start exhausting their tin, and so they just have to get tin from further and further away. So these Bronze Age societies were had to have tin shipped in from Western Europe, and when the Sea Peoples like arose and disrupted the tin trade, you know, this is a theory on why like the Bronze Age societies collapsed because they couldn't get tin. And you know, if they can't get tin, then you start looking at like what can we do instead, and like, you know, there's proof there's evidence that they knew how to make steel and do iron stuff like beforehand, but it just wasn't practical. Like, why would I do that when I've got plenty of bronze? And so you start switching to iron when you can't get your tin. And so you can kind of look at the Ice and Fire map the same way. Like in Dany's chapters, she talks about how there's plenty of copper in Slaver's Bay, but you know, the idea is that tin would they're because they've been around so long, there'd be no tin left in those hills, so they would have to get tin from other places, which means like if we're talking about like why the Giscari civilization collapsed, it probably wasn't because of the Dragon Lords. It was probably because the Valyrians disrupted the tin trade. And like but you know, whether this is just like was George like trying to mimic the Bronze Age collapse, or was he just like lucky, you know? So I don't know, like when he designed the world and stuff like this. But anyway, this is all geology stuff. Isn't the faceless warg thing to do with skin changing? The face gets put on top. Arya gets the memories of the face that gets put on. Yeah, that is the weird, creepy thing, and I don't have very good explanation of like why Arya is like feeling this girl's memories. Like, why should somebody's memories be in their face? You know, my best explanation is that she just made that up. She just imagined it, but it's very like, you know, I've reread the Arya chapters a bit, and it's funny that there's no proof that she's actually very ugly in the ugly little girl chapter. Like, no one stares at her, you know. No one's like oh gosh, there's a freakish girl over there. Like, it could be that she's just imagining the fact that like she's got this like ugly face, and that her face is actually Arya's face the entire time, or Cat of the Canal's face, which is Arya's face, you know. And that nothing's changed. She does get this like weird mysterious feeling of the girl's memories, and I have no good explanation for that. Like, why would somebody's memories be in their skin? Like, that's not even a werewood, you know. Maybe the masks are made out of werewood. That's my bet. That's a good explanation. That it's a really thin piece of werewood, and that those are the masks. And she puts that on, and she gets this girl's memory. But I mean, why would someone's skin be the receptacle for memories? But yeah. Next, the FBI assassinated Fred Hampton. So there's that. Fred Hampton was killed by the Chicago PD, not the FBI, but who Chicago PD, by the way, is one of the most corrupt police organizations in America, and always has been. But the but I suppose what the idea that the FBI like maybe like gave them information on them or something, but nonetheless, like FBI didn't do it. But also the idea of like, is it an assassination, or if somebody accidentally get killed in a raid? Carmine just woke up. What? Waiting for Preston to read your comment. Skipping it. Which comment? Which comment am I skipping? Okay. Oh, where do you see Justin Massey's arc going in the fanfic? The Wall, Bravos, both. Well, it's interesting. I hadn't really thought very much of it because before tonight with because Justin Massey was dealing with so many like problems at the Wall, like I didn't really think he would actually make it to Bravos. But somebody, I can be convinced of things. I think it would be a very interesting aspect to have like Arya maybe meet Justin Massey. That might be a kind of interesting thing, like Arya hearing about Arya being in Bravos. It's almost like too good, right? I mean, maybe in that respect, it's something like that should happen. Like, I kind of thought that he would just get like caught up at the Wall and wouldn't be able to make it back. And even if he did, it didn't matter because like Stannis's request was so ridiculous. But yeah, this idea that he could somehow mess up Arya's plot with the two Aryas is fascinating. So maybe it will go that way. Maybe Justin Massey will make it to Bravos in the fanfic and have Arya kill him or something. What do you call an abortion in Prague? A canceled check? I guess so. In the State Department, are there any popular urban myths in there, or is there like a fringe theory popular among the workers? I've never heard anything. I've never heard anything like. I mean, obviously, like State Department people are regular people, so like you run into, regular people that believe weird conspiracy theories just like anywhere else, like Trump supporters that believe whatever crazy conspiracy theory or whatever, you're going to run it. But I don't know if there's like a cultural thing that I've ever read, like even some of the urban myths that I've read. And I read an article about Dean Rusk once having a lunch with JFK where he asked if he heard a rumor that the Soviets were putting together a nuclear weapon at their embassy, and JFK was like, yeah, that's my understanding. Do you know something different? And he doesn't know if like JFK was joking or was serious. But even that, like, I just read that in an article, that I didn't read that in the culture of like the State Department. So no, I don't know if I know there's any urban myths or anything like that, or fringe theories. I'm sure like anywhere else you can get groupthink about like specific policy within a country. I know that specifically the State Department was very wrong about like Yugoslavia and Romania around the time of Tito, about who would support whom. That all the foreign service officers were like listening to the same people. They're like, oh no, the people on the street love this guy, and then he was like overthrown. Like, there's that kind of stuff that I hear that people get in like groupthink, but I don't think in like culturally, like the entire like the organization, I've ever heard anything like that. Okay, gotta get through all this. Stand-up subversion is him in Winterfell, Great Hall, making a pact with Roose yielding, and then Ramsay kills them both with the roof. Red Wedding level shock. Yeah, that could be something. That could be something. Like Stannis ends up like winning, takes the castle. Roose is forced to submit, and this is the big thing with like the snow and the roofs falling in and everything being built. Like I thought of that with the murder, but yeah, with a pact there, that's 2 in 1. That's 2 in 1 go. You get the shock of the kinslaying, but you'd also get Stannis killed at the same time. Yeah, that would work. That would work. I guess Asha would be the one observing it. I'm trying to think where she would be and how she would get out. Would she just be would she be then captured by Ramsay and have to figure things out? Few dragons dive old age. Even Balerion and Sarah's trip overseas could be blamed. Knowing this, could dragons live more than 1 century? Cannibal. Yeah, that's the thing, especially with like Maester conspiracies too, with poisonings and such. So yeah, we have no idea. I mean, Balerion. Well, first of all, Balerion is at least 200 years old, little over 200 years old at least, because he flew from Valyria. He was the last dragon to see Valyria. The rest of the dragons were born on Dragonstone, but Balerion was actually hatched in Valyria. So he's at least, then he lived for the 100 years on Dragonstone, and then 100 years with Viserys. So he's 200. So yeah, I mean, and who knows? Balerion could have been poisoned. You have no idea. You have no idea if it could be that or Sarah's trip or something. But we have no idea. They could be like turtles, right? Where and yeah, Cannibal's just a mystery. No one knows about Cannibal. It's said to be very old. So conceivably, dragons could live, thousands of years. Who knows? No, it's not in your wheelhouse, but do you know any thoughts on the disappearance of Naomi Wu, popular Chinese technology YouTuber and LGBT advocate? Yeah, you obviously, like, people disappear in China, The thing about the Chinese government you got to remember is that also they're not as centralized as one might think. They're less centralized than, say, the United States. So like if a local official thinks, yeah, this woman is a problem, they could make her disappear, and like on a national level, like they knew nothing about it, so like that kind of stuff can happen. But yeah, I think she was abducted by somebody in the government probably that didn't like what she was doing, and a lot of people disappear. But again, I don't know if it's like a national level, like on a federal level, are they sitting there being like, oh, we got to do something, versus like some local guy who's like, yeah, let's take her out. So, but I have no clue though, obviously something that could easily happen. What is this, an EU friendly stream time? Just as I fix my sleeping schedule. Also, when is the next chapter of the fanfic project coming out? Tinkering with Bran for a while, but yeah, I don't think we're gonna see Bran for at least a few weeks. So I'm sorry for delays with that. Because the other chapter, I mean, Barristan is also pretty close, but I've got to send it to editors and such. But it's just it's just I ridiculously want Bran to be perfect, and it's and finding all the, like having each editor like have the free time to take a look at it, and I like to have everybody's opinion on it, and so it's sorry, but it'll be out. Just some weeks. Okay, maybe mystery box, but if Dane's honor Ned, it has to be because he spared Arthur. Where could George be going with that plot thread? Danes support the Golden Company. Yeah, it's so obviously like the most fan, like the general boring fan theory is that they honor Ned because he brought back the sword, which is pretty small. Sparing Arthur, that's a possibility, but at the same time, like, why make it so obvious by naming somebody Ned? So I'd like to, like I'm gonna leave this open to fans with the fanfic, like on where that story comes from, because nothing seems to make sense. Like if it's something like that, then why would you name somebody Ned and it be so obvious in public? But where's it going? Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's got to support the Golden Company eventually, right? So, but we did see Ashara dance with John Connington at Harrenhal, so maybe. All right, gotta get through these. Gotta head to bed. All right. Nothing like listening to Preston while painting some Deathwing Terminators. Gee ho. He's some Warhammer 40k. Should Ned be a legendary figure in Westeros? As far as the general public knows, he battled Arthur Dayne and won. At least in the north, should Ned be considered an incredible warrior? Well, the thing is like he did it once, right? Like I think, yeah, on some level everybody's gonna remember this, right? But it's also been like 15 years, and people are very much like, what have you done for me lately, right? And like, do you have a lot of stories? So like Barristan, for example, has done so much more than Ned. So much more. Like massive amount more. He killed Maelys the Monstrous in single combat. He won all of these tourneys. He fought in all these wars. He's got a cool nickname story. Like he's a Kingsguard. Like he's legendary, but at the same time, like, are people like willing to treat him like shit to his face? Yes. Like Jorah treats him like shit to his face. Like Joffrey takes his white cloak. Everybody laughs at him in the room. So I think like being a legendary person, like in stories, like only goes so far. So like, yeah, everyone's heard this story. Oh yeah, that's a pretty cool story, and it means nothing. Like I don't care. Like it's like, yeah, I care, but I don't care. It's a weird thing like that, right? Like Jaime, youngest Kingsguard ever, like won all of these tourneys, and do we care? Killed the king, and then people just treat him like crap to his face all the time. Same with the Blackfish and stuff like that. I mean, it's weird how the Blackfish got more respect from Jaime than anybody else gives any other character respect in the story. So, I mean, I think it is very interesting how little respect Barristan the Bold gets, considering who he is. So I think it might be something like that. Is Arya Cat and Rob's heir because they know she's alive? I don't know if Cat yet knows Arya's alive. I'm trying to think.
Wouldn't Harwin have told her? Have told Stoneheart?
Right. Harwin should have told Stoneheart. You're right. Yeah. But we also don't. But he also doesn't know where Arya's been in a while. So like they know Arya was alive like last year, right? But
After South Pens, who knows?
yeah. So it might be something like that. But though it should be quite surprising that like, oh my gosh, I saw that Arya was alive. Like, but you're right that Harwin knew and he would have told Stoneheart. Because even though Harwin's name is not mentioned in the Brienne chapters, Brienne mentions that one of the people has a northern accent, so we know that it's Harwin.
Yes.
Yeah. So. Yeah. So. I mean, plus like, she met Thoros too. It's not. I guess it doesn't even need like Harwin. But yeah, like, yeah. So, but once Kat finds out that Arya's alive, and shouldn't she want to pass the crown to Arya? Yes, I think she probably would. I can't think of, because Lady Stoneheart still thinks Bran and Rickon are dead, and she still thinks that Sansa is. Well, she knows about the Red Wedding, but she knows that Sansa's missing, but she still knows that Sansa's married to Tyrion or whatever, so she can't trust Sansa. So yeah, it would be Arya. In fact, doesn't she? She actually specifically says to Robb, "What about Arya?" And Robb says, "You and I both know she's dead, or probably dead, right?" In that in the infamous Will chapter. So this is a very good question. You're right that like Kat previously showed motivation of wanting to crown Arya. And the Brotherhood knows that she's alive. The question is just trying to track her down. But you're right that like Kat, she should want to find Arya and crown her, make her Queen of the Riverlands. It seems like something that she would do. It's funny because Arya is actually like, even though this has all been broken, but she was supposed to be betrothed to a Frey. She was supposed to marry one of the Freys, right? Probably either it would. Wait, what wasn't it? Was Arya?
Is Elmar?
Elmar?
I think. Who is missing? Haven't been. Doesn't appear in Storm.
Yeah. Yes. Elmar is supposed to marry Arya Stark, and then Elmar squires for Roose Bolton, and then he learns that.
We never see him after that, I think.
Oh my god, you're right. He just disappears from the story.
Forgotten. Yeah.
It's got to come back. It's got to come back at some point.
Dude should be really angry against Ramsay, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Elmar Frey appears out of nowhere and kills Ramsay. Could be good. In Winterfell.
Yeah, somebody already cast doubt on Elmar's parentage. He's actually Black Walder Frey's bastard. Oh, who knows? Who knows? All right. I gotta get. Oh my god. All right. Stop doing super chats because I need to go to bed. Okay. Um. Where am I here? Regarding face changing, in Roman law, persona literally meant a mask that a lawyer would wear when representing a person. Only legal citizenry had the right to a persona, but the idea could be mask identity equals memories. Interesting. Interesting. Of course, I always hear all of these things, and I'm like, what was George thinking? Was he thinking this? Um, if it happened earlier than A Dance with Dragons, maybe I'd think he was thinking about this. The problem is that, like, by the time he's writing The Winds of Winter, he's just kind of writing a little free and loose. Maybe. I think face changing and glamoring are the same thing, same as warging and dragon riding. The way Mel talks about glamoring with Mance is very similar to the kindly man talking about Arya with face changing. Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, warging and dragon riding can be pretty interchangeable. I don't think there's much significantly different between the way like Varamir Six Skins like reacts with many of his animals, like not when he's inside them, like looking through their eyes, but like otherwise when he's controlling them six at once. He's essentially they're just bound to him like a dragon is to a rider. So I think I would agree with that. Now, face changing and glamoring, yeah, it's this idea that it's more of a telepathic thing, right? That it's like more that you're like influencing the person and having like a telepathic suggestion over them to make them see something that isn't there. So it could very well be just be that. It's interesting that the different faceless men have to use different techniques. Like, some people use artifices, but they actually use but other people use glamours. But do they describe glamoring as actually different from physically changing their face? Like actually physically causing the muscles to move versus like having telepathic influence over somebody. But I think this is a good idea. I mean, I think it simplifies things. I'm a pizza delivery driver, and your streams are great for my long nights on the road. Keep up the good work. Love your stuff. Thank you, Spice. Thank you, Spice. Prior to Stannis' King's Landing invasion, Lannister loyalists put Princess Myrcella and Prince Tommen into security protocols at Dorne and Rosby. Prior to Stannis' Dragonstone invasion, Targaryen loyalists put Viserys III into a security protocol. I mean, yeah, I think that I think in general that Viserys, was sent to Dragonstone, knowing that like an attack was going to happen. That you don't put all of your assets in one place. I think Rob talks about not having all of his gifts in one place or something. So yeah, I mean, I think that's more or less the situation that you'd want to put people in different locations in case something goes down. So the sad thing is that like Stannis doesn't really have Shireen protected that well at the wall. I mean, they were supposed to be at Eastwatch where it was a little safer. Maybe I don't know if Shireen like did something stupid and defied Stannis, but I think Shireen was much safer at Eastwatch if anything happened. But yeah, generally speaking, like you want your kids in different places during some sort of like invasion. But yeah, that's exactly what happened to Viserys. Is he was trying to protect his wife and child, and so he sent them to Dragonstone. Oh, but then here's saying prior to Stannis' invasion, did it happen again? Well, I mean, I think. Well, obviously, it did with the four loyal men. Like when Stannis invaded Dragonstone, like Viserys and Dany weren't there. So I think like no matter what happens, like when an invasion happens, people want to get the monarch out of there, or at least a helpless monarch out of there, or an heir out of there. I don't see Stannis dying in battle. Assumed he would be killed by Mance or the others at the Winterfell crypt. The roof theory makes way too much sense, though. No, yeah, it's true. Um, it does make a lot of sense. Like now, like once he said it, I was like, oh god, that does sound exactly like what would happen. Because I thought the roof thing would just kill. I don't know why I didn't think that would also just kill Stannis, but like yeah, like when I heard about the roof thing, like I thought that would be Roose, but it could be Roose and Stannis at the same time. Um,
Uh, Sorry, what do you think about Horsebane Amber in all this? The old man and the possible suicide mission.
yeah, Horsebane Umber. Um, yeah, I'm like I feel like his Maester knowledge needs to come into play somehow. Like I feel like he's the one that helped Mance write the pink letter. Like what? Because why else have him be like a Citadel person? Um, but but does he have does like is it in his interest to kill off Stannis? Like, would Horsebane Umber hate Stannis? Um, or want to
I was
work for
thinking,
Roose? Want
yeah,
to work for Ramsay?
I think his role might be like opening the gates for Stannis, something
Mm.
like that. Maybe he
Yeah, there's
can
definitely more
drug.
Umbers on the inside. And there's a lot of different ideas I've heard about how Stannis would get over the walls. Like one, the snowdrifts are so high that the walls aren't that high anymore. That perhaps they can use regular siege engines and grappling hooks to get over because the snowdrifts are so high. I mean, it's why Theon didn't die, um, and so it might
Yeah.
be something like that. Um, all right, about the trope of people jumping from the towers. Could Aegis, Tristan, and Isolde's stories have inspired Ashara? She confused Ned's banner for some code. Um, let's see here. In Tristan and Isolde, what's the ending? Is there a tower here? Trying to. Here we go. In the poem, Tristan is wounded by a poisoned lance while attempting to rescue a young woman from 6 knights. Tristan sends his friend Cahadin to find Iseult of Ireland, the only person who can heal him. Tristan tells Cahadin to sail back with white sails if he is bringing Iseult, and black sails if he's not. Perhaps an echo of the Greek myth of Theseus. Um, Iseult agrees to return to Tristan with Cahadin, but Tristan's jealous wife, Iseult of the White Hands, lies to Tristan about the color of the sails. Tristan dies of grief, thinking Iseult has betrayed him, and Iseult dies over his corpse. I see. So the idea is that like Ashara is standing atop her tower, and she sees the wrong sails or wrong color sails, and she gets depressed and she jumps at that moment. Um. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. That's, hmm. Something like that could happen. Yeah, I haven't really put much thought into it, especially when people are like, I mean, this idea that the Ashara actually is dead. When I think I've like I've spent way too much time in the theory world where everyone already assumes that Ashara is alive, but that would be something. That I mean, if Ashara is actually dead, that's pretty powerful and painful. Any chance of Littlefinger meeting Stoneheart? I don't think it's necessary, but just because I think her story mainly has to do with Brienne and Jaime, and I don't know if like Littlefinger's needs to see her again. Like his story is about Sansa, and I think seeing cats and seeing something supernatural, it just kind of goes against I don't know, like his logical nature or something. But then again, if he's into prophecy, I don't know. Anyway, gotta get to sleep soon. But also Rhaegar's man, love you, Rhaegar's man. Super late, but check out Michael Talks About Stuff. He's adding new discussion to the community. You'll like his work. All right, Michael Talks About Stuff. You've got all right, interesting. Marwyn will ride Miriam's door. All right. Sounds good. Night's King did nothing wrong. Changed my mind. Funny stuff. Anyway, and finally, I am delirious. It's 2 a.m. for me. But LOL, dude. How are you still on the stream? Go to bed. I am. Anyway, thank you for all. I'm kind of heading to bed now, but some of you guys stay up this late to watch me, so I guess this is all like just desserts. Thank you all, and I'll see you guys next time. All right, bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you,
Preston.
me too. Thanks for keeping me up.